cold wind sweeps across the boundless Mongolian steppe, the grass shivering like a living ocean beneath a sky carved open by dawn. From beyond the horizon, a slow, thunderous echo rises, hooves beating against the earth with the certainty of a coming storm. It is the sound of a figure who would one day unite warring clans, redraw the borders of continents, and leave a legacy that still shapes our world centuries later. This is the story of Genghis Khan, not as a conqueror of myth, but as a human being forged by love, betrayal, hardship, loyalty, and an unbreakable will. His journey begins softly beneath the same wind you hear now, and grows into one of the most extraordinary transformations in history. Imagine standing there, the cold wind on your face, the distant rumble vibrating through the ground, the sense that the world is about to change forever. If you were there on that first morning, what would you notice first? The sky, the silence, or the feeling of destiny waking beneath your feet? Share your answer in the comments and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. If this journey into his life stirs your curiosity, gently tap like and subscribe to travel deeper into the heart of history with us. Now dim your screen, let the air grow still, and step into the story. In the quiet cradle of the Mongolian steppe, a child named Temüjin opened his eyes beneath a sky that stretched like an endless ocean of blue. Around him, the wind moved softly through the grass, carrying the first whispers of a life that would one day reshape the world. For now, though, he was simply an infant wrapped in furs, lying close to his mother's warmth, unaware of the path ahead or the stories already gathering around his birth. The year, as later chroniclers would remember, was around 1162. It was spring on the steppe, the season when new calves wobbled on unsteady legs, and the rivers ran clearer after their long winter sleep. The land was waking gently, and so too was this new child, Temüjin, named for an enemy his father had defeated shortly before his birth. The name was meant to honor strength, resilience, and the unyielding spirit admired by all nomadic clans. Yet to his mother, Holen, he was simply her first son, a small life she would shield with every breath she owned. The felt walls of the family jur, their round home made of wooden lattice and wool, curved protectively around the family. Morning light slipped through gaps near the roof hole, where smoke from the cooking fire drifted lazily upward. Holen sat with her newborn nestled against her chest, humming a low, steady melody, one of those ancient songs passed from mother to daughter across uncounted generations. The notes were soft, carrying the warmth of lullabies, the reassurance of belonging, and the hope that the spirits of sky and earth would watch over the child. Outside, the steppe opened like a vast green sea. Herd animals moved in slow arcs, their silhouettes stretching long across the dew-kissed grass. Horses stamped their hooves softly, releasing small puffs of steam into the cool morning air. Farther in the distance, small clusters of yurts dotted the plains, belonging to other families of the Börte clan. Smoke curled upward from each of them as well, rising toward the same pale sky. Temüjin's father, Yesugei, stood outside the yurt with his arms folded, his expression a mixture of pride and calculation. A new son meant the continuation of lineage, an important truth for a man who carried responsibility as both a leader and a warrior. His voice, when he spoke to the other men gathered near him, was the voice of someone accustomed to authority. Yet when he stepped back inside and looked upon the tiny boy in Holen's arms, his features softened just a little, as though he too felt the tenderness of the moment. Holen, however, remained the quiet center of the scene. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders as she cradled her child. She knew the steppe was beautiful, but its beauty was woven with hardship, unpredictable storms, and clan rivalries that could erupt without warning. Her life, once peaceful, had changed forever the day Yasuge had taken her from her Merkit tribe. Since then, she had learned to carve out strength in unfamiliar surroundings, determined that none of the challenges that touched her life would fracture the family she would raise. She lowered her forehead gently to Temüjin's, feeling his small breaths against her skin. To her, the world narrowed to the quiet rhythm of his heartbeat, to the softness of his hands as they curled near her robe, and to the warmth of the fire spreading across the interior of the jur. She whispered a blessing that her grandmother had once whispered to her. May the eternal blue sky watch over you, and may your spirit always find its path. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of distant rain. It brushed across the grasslands with a whispering hush, as if moving purposefully towards some unseen destination. Travelers often said that the wind on the steppe was alive, that it remembered the rise and fall of generations, that it carried stories from one horizon to the next. Perhaps, in its own quiet way, it sensed that a new story had begun. Temüjin's early days were simple ones. He slept in his mother's arms, waking only to the gentle rhythm of daily life. When Holen went outside to tend to small tasks, she wrapped him securely in warm furs and held him close, letting him feel the sway of her movements. The sun warmed them by day, the fire cradled them by night. The world was wide, but for him, it existed in the softness of her voice, the steady beat of her footsteps, and the warmth of the small home where he took his first breaths. The Borjigin clan camp remained quiet through most spring mornings. The adults worked silently, moving with practiced ease as they milked mares, checked on their herds, prepared food, and repaired tools for the coming seasons. The soundscape was gentle, the murmur of adults speaking in low tones, the soft bleating of sheep, the occasional whinny of horses, and the distant rush of wind brushing down from the northern hills. Even as an infant, Temüjin seemed unusually aware of the world around him. His eyes followed small movements, the flicker of firelight, the swaying of grass through the doorway, the shadows cast by his father's boots. His mother often smiled at how quickly he quieted when held up to the open air, as though he recognized the steppe in some instinctive way, as though its vastness soothed him rather than frightened him. As weeks passed, the family prepared for their seasonal movements. Life on the steppe was built around motion. Genghis Khan's ancestors believed deeply in following the land's rhythms, shifting between grazing grounds to keep their animals healthy. When the time came, their jur would be dismantled in a matter of minutes, walls folded, felt rolled, poles bundled. Everything they owned could be carried on wagons or horses. It was a life without permanent walls, but not without a sense of home. For nomads, home lived in the heart, in family, in shared stories told beneath the same unchanging sky. One evening, Yasuge lifted his son for the first time with both arms, holding him toward the fading light of sunset. The sky burned with warm streaks of gold and red, spreading across the horizon like a giant tapestry. Temüjin's tiny face turned toward the brightness, his eyes blinking as though trying to understand the glow. The moment was quiet, almost ceremonial, though no ritual was spoken aloud. Still, something in the gesture felt symbolic. This small child being shown the world he would one day walk across, the world he would be shaped by, and the world he would eventually reshape in return. Yasuge lowered him gently and handed him back to Holun with surprising tenderness. "He will be strong," he said softly, almost to himself. "The sky gave him to us for a reason." But life on the steppe was not made only of gentle moments. Hardship travelled hand in hand with beauty, and even in peaceful seasons, the threat of conflict lingered like a distant shadow. Yasuge was often away on clan matters, visiting allies or negotiating uneasy ties with neighbouring tribes. The Mongol world was a tapestry woven of loyalty and rivalry, and each thread could shift unexpectedly. Holun knew this too well, which was why she held her child a little tighter whenever the wind grew restless. As summer crept closer, Temüjin's senses awakened further. He reacted to the warm scent of milk boiling over the fire, to the soothing rasp of wool against his cheek, to the murmurs of women as they prepared meals. Sometimes Holun carried him to the edge of the camp, letting him feel the afternoon breeze. The horizon stretched endlessly, and the sky above them seemed so wide that one could almost imagine it touching the earth at both ends. "Look closely, little one," Holun would whisper as she held him upright. "This is your land, the land of your ancestors. One day you will walk these fields yourself." Temüjin's small fingers reached for the grass, brushing lightly against the soft blades. The steppe responded in its own quiet way, sending a gentle ripple of wind flowing outward, as if greeting the child who would one day become its most legendary son. In the evenings, the family gathered around the low fire in the center of the ger. The flames crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the felt walls. Yasuge often shared stories of forefathers whose names carried strength. Men who hunted across great distances, who rode beneath storms without fear, who lived by courage and cunning. Though Temüjin was too young to understand the words, he sensed the rhythm of his father's voice, the comforting rise and fall of tales shaped by centuries of memory. Sometimes neighbours visited, bringing cheese, fermented mare's milk, or fresh meat. The conversations were always carried in low tones, mindful of the sleeping infant. They spoke of grazing routes, weather signs, and distant rumours from other clans. Holun listened carefully while rocking Temüjin in her arms, absorbing every detail. She understood the delicate balance of the steppe, where choices could echo through generations. On nights when the moon shone bright, Holun would step outside with her child bundled against her chest. The sky glittered with stars scattered so thickly that the world seemed dusted with silver. The steppe at night held its own kind of serenity, horses shifting in their sleep, grass rustling in soft waves, and the faintest hum of insects in the cool air. Under that vast sky, Temüjin slept easily. The world was enormous, but he was cradled gently within it, surrounded by family, protected by tradition, and soothed by the softness of a mother's voice. And yet, even in these earliest moments, life on the steppe was already beginning to shape him. Through wind, through sound, through the shifting patterns of sky and earth. His story would grow far beyond these gentle beginnings, but the foundation of his spirit was being quietly carved in these first months. Endurance in the face of uncertainty, sensitivity to the rhythms of nature, and a deep bond with the world that stretched endlessly around him. The grasslands moved in slow, sweeping breaths, and the days passed with a sense of calm continuity. But change, in the Mongol world, never slept for long. The horizon held more than beauty. It held the promise of journeys, challenges, and choices that would soon rise like distant storm clouds. For now, though, Temüjin rested peacefully in the arms of the woman who loved him most, unaware that the steppe itself seemed to pause each evening in a quiet, waiting stillness, as if sensing the beginnings of a life that would echo far beyond the plains where he first opened his eyes. And as the last light of the steppe faded into twilight, the world around him seemed to whisper its own gentle message, one that every child of the grasslands heard in their bones long before they understood it. The sky is vast, the land is patient, and every story begins softly, like a breath of wind at dawn. As the seasons turned, Temüjin began to sense more of the world that unfolded endlessly around him. The soft warmth of early spring gave way to the deeper glow of summer, and with each passing day, the child grew more alert, more curious, and more attuned to the rhythms of the steppe. The grass rose higher, brushing gently against the legs of the family's horses, and the rivers swelled with the melted memory of distant mountain snows. Life moved forward with a quiet, steady certainty. By the time Temüjin could stand on wobbling legs, clutching at Hölün's sleeve for balance, the steppe had already begun its subtle work of shaping him. The nomadic life required strength, but it also required keen eyes and a soft awareness of one's surroundings. These earliest lessons came without instruction, whispered to him through wind, earth, and the gentle order of daily tasks. Hölün watched her son with patient affection, guiding him with a firm but comforting hand. She showed him how to steady himself on uneven ground, how to listen for the movement of herds long before they came into view, and how to calm himself by breathing with the steady rhythm of the animals around them. "The steppe teaches those who listen," she often murmured, brushing his wind-tangled hair from his forehead. "And you, little one, must learn to hear everything." Temüjin's younger siblings began arriving soon after: Kasar, Hachiun, Temüge. With each new child, the family's small world grew a bit larger, a bit louder, a bit more full of warmth. The children clung to one another, crawling and later running through the grass together, discovering insects under stones, chasing shadows cast by passing clouds, and laughing freely into the open air. Even then, Temüjin displayed a quiet steadiness, an instinct to watch first, to understand before acting, to place himself between his siblings and anything unfamiliar. Sometimes, as the children played, the elder clan members would sit nearby and talk. Their words floated lazily on the warm breeze, too soft for the children to fully grasp, but filled with threads of meaning they would recall later. They spoke of shifting alliances, of distant disputes, of the delicate balance of power that stretched across the plains. Even the softest breeze seemed to carry reminders that their people lived between cooperation and conflict, between abundance and scarcity, between peace and the ever-present possibility of change. Temüjin's father, Yasuge, was often away, moving between camps, visiting allies, and maintaining the fragile ties that held the Börte clan within the greater fabric of Mongol tribes. Each departure carried a natural tension. The elders understood that leadership was a responsibility carried on horseback, always in motion, always uncertain. Yet to Temüjin, His father's absences were simply part of the rhythm of life, as familiar as the shifting seasons. When Yasuge returned, the camp stirred with quiet excitement. Temüjin ran toward him with the eager steps of a young boy longing for recognition. Yasuge would lift him by the arms or tousle his hair before carrying him inside the ger. Those moments, brief but warm, planted seeds of admiration that would shape Temüjin's understanding of strength and honor. Despite their father's frequent travels, it was Holen who held the family together with unyielding resolve. Her voice guided the children through their routines. Her hands mended their clothing. Her stories soothed them through cold nights. She taught them humility, patience, and the quiet courage needed to endure the shifting fortunes of nomadic life. There was no room for fear on the steppe. Fear, she said, was like a stray horse. It wandered, if not tethered. And so she gave her children calmness to hold on to. As Temüjin grew from toddler to young boy, his world expanded beyond the safe circle of the family camp. He learned the early foundations of riding, first sitting before Yasuge on the saddle, later gripping the mane of a gentle pony as an elder walked beside him. The movement felt natural, as though his body understood the rhythm long before his mind did. Riding was not a skill on the steppe. It was a necessity, and one that every child learned as soon as their legs could steady themselves. He also began helping with simple tasks, gathering dry dung for the fire, fetching small buckets of water, or watching younger siblings as the adults prepared meals. These were ordinary chores, but they taught responsibility in ways no formal lessons could. Each task tied him more closely to the life of his people. Yet the steppe, for all its beauty, carried shadows that even children could sense. Rivalries between clans rose and fell like shifting winds. Though the Borjigin were respected, they were not immune to the complexities of the wider world. Temüjin often overheard fragments of conversation. The Tatar tribe to the east growing bolder, the Merkit stirring restlessly, questions of loyalty whispered behind polite greetings. These murmurs flowed around him like low thunder in the distance, felt more than understood. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the plains in warm hues of amber and rose, Temüjin walked beside Holen to the crest of a small hill. From there, the horizon stretched in every direction, uninterrupted and serene. Holen knelt beside him and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Look well," she said softly. "Out here, everything changes. The seasons shift, clans rise and fall, herds move where the grass grows greenest. But the sky," she lifted her gaze upward, "the sky endures. You must remember that, Temüjin. When the ground beneath you feels uncertain, look to the sky. It will remind you of who you are." He followed her gaze, watching the clouds drift slowly across the fading light. The air was cool, filled with the earthy scent of trampled grass and distant smoke. In that quiet moment, he felt the world not as a vast expanse, but as something close and protective, like a great, sheltering presence. In the months that followed, Temüjin continued to grow in strength and awareness. His legs grew sturdy, his balance sure. He learned to recognize the subtle signs of weather, the direction of wind, the shape of distant clouds, the tremble of grass before a storm. He could tell the difference between the call of an eagle and the cry of a heron. He began to sense moods in the camp, when adults were tense, when they were hopeful, when they were preparing for something unknown. What he could not sense yet was how profoundly his destiny would shift in the years to come. Childhood, for now, remained a gentle landscape of discovery. Days spent chasing horses' shadows, nights spent listening to stories beneath glowing embers, and every moment shaped softly by his mother's steady love. But the steppe, ancient and unpredictable, was preparing its own lessons. In the distance, threads of fate were already tightening. Threads woven by clan tensions, lingering grudges, and the fragile bonds between leaders. Soon, the safety of Temüjin's early years would be replaced by trials that would test his spirit, challenge his family, and pull him into the deeper currents of Mongol life. For now, though, he walked hand in hand with Holun, feeling the cool evening wind on his face and watching the shadows grow longer across the plains. Childhood still held him gently, like the last warm light before dusk. Unaware that tomorrow's dawn would bring him one step closer to the hardships that would shape him forever. As Temüjin entered the early years of boyhood, the world around him seemed to widen with every sunrise. The gentle rhythm of his childhood remained, but with each passing season, new layers of awareness settled into his young mind. Quietly, steadily, like morning dew across the grasslands. He was no longer the small child clinging to his mother's robe. He now moved with the confidence of someone beginning to recognize his place among the families of the Börte clan. Each day brought lessons woven into the framework of daily life. Temüjin accompanied the older boys as they checked the grazing herds, feeling the earth shift softly beneath his boots. He practiced riding on a pony of his own, a sturdy little creature with a coat the color of storm clouds. Its steady gait helped him grow surer in the saddle, learning to adjust his balance with the steppe's shifting winds. To a young Mongol boy, riding was as natural as breathing, yet it still filled him with a thrill that was difficult to describe. Part freedom, part belonging, part quiet understanding that mobility was the essence of their people. With each ride, the world unfolded around him. The grass moved like waves beneath the sky's vast canopy. Birds circled overhead, calling out in clear tones that echoed across the plains. Some mornings, mist clung to the earth, softening the horizon until distant hills appeared like floating islands. Temüjin felt an instinctive connection to all of it, as though the land were gently guiding him, preparing him for something he could not yet name. Among the other boys of the clan, Temüjin was neither the tallest nor the strongest, yet there was something in his presence that drew attention, an unusual steadiness, a quiet determination that made the older boys include him in their tasks. Though still a child, he had a way of watching the world closely, absorbing details others overlooked. When the group raced their ponies across the grasslands, Temüjin was rarely first. But he was often the one who noticed the shifting direction of wind or the faint signs of a hidden hole in the ground. His awareness became his strength. One afternoon, while the boys practiced shooting arrows at a rough, wooden target, Temüjin struggled to pull the small bow with enough force. His arms shook, and the arrow only fluttered a few paces forward. The older boys laughed, not cruelly, but with the natural teasing that filled their long days together. Temüjin's face flushed with frustration, but he did not respond. Instead, he studied the bow more carefully, adjusted his stance, and tried again. The next arrow flew farther, still not far, but enough to make the boys stop and nod approvingly. "You learn quickly," one of them said, placing a hand on Temüjin's shoulder. Temüjin simply lowered his eyes, quietly pleased. These small moments began to shape his identity among the clans. He was not loud, nor did he seek attention. His strength lay in persistence, in patience, in an instinctive understanding that skill grew from repetition and observation rather than immediate talent. Adults noticed this too. Some nodded to Yasuge with approving eyes, whispering that the boy had potential, but even those words were spoken gently, as if the vastness of the steppe itself discouraged too much praise too soon. Yasuge watched his son's growth with pride tempered by caution. He saw the way Temüjin's eyes followed every lesson, the way he listened before speaking, the way he already seemed to think 2 steps ahead. Yet, Yasuge knew that childhood could only be protected for so long. The Mongol world, unpredictable and often unforgiving, expected its sons to grow quickly into men capable of riding into conflict, surviving harsh winters, and navigating the fragile alliances between clans. Temüjin felt this expectation too, though he could not yet articulate it. It appeared in the guarded expressions of elders when strangers arrived at camp. It appeared in the careful words his father spoke during council gatherings. It appeared in the way Hoelun would glance toward the horizon on windy days, as if searching for signs only she could read. Still, life continued with its familiar comforts. Some evenings, the children gathered near the fire, their faces warm with reflected light. Elders shared stories that blended memory and myth, tales of ancestor heroes who had braved blizzards, hunted great beasts, or crossed unknown lands guided only by the stars. Temüjin listened with wide-eyed wonder. He imagined riding alongside those legendary figures, feeling the wind roar past as hooves thundered beneath him. Though he did not yet know the weight that real leadership would demand, the stories planted early seeds of courage within him. Among all these influences, perhaps the most important came from Hoelun. She spoke less of glory and more of resilience, kindness, and loyalty. A leader, she told him one evening as they repaired a torn riding coat, must first understand the hearts of his people. Strength can be seen, but true wisdom must be heard. Her words settled softly in Temüjin's chest, becoming a quiet compass he would carry all his life. As the children grew, play sometimes turned into competition, foot races across the grass, wrestling matches in the soft earth, or tests of balance while riding bareback. Temüjin rarely dominated these games, but he rarely gave up either. When he fell, he stood again. When he lost, he watched the winner carefully, studying what had made them stronger or faster. His defeats became lessons, and the boys around him gradually recognized his quiet, unwavering resolve. During this period, the Börte clan also traveled more frequently. The landscape shifted with their movements, lush pastures giving way to rocky stretches, rolling hills rising where before there had been open plains. Each new campsite offered new sights and new challenges. Temüjin helped dismantle the family ger when they prepared to move, tugging at the ropes with small but determined hands. He watched the adults organize the animals, load their belongings, and lead the caravan across the steppe. The rhythm of travel became as familiar as the beating of his own heart. At night, the family slept in different positions depending on where they stopped. Some evenings were warm and peaceful. Others were buffeted by winds that moaned against the ger walls. During those nights, Temüjin curled close to his siblings, comforting them when the wind grew loud. He felt responsible, even then, for their sense of safety. Sometimes, distant travelers passed near the camp, hunters, traders, messengers from allied clans. They brought news that seemed to drift like dust from far-off lands. Though much of it was spoken in tones meant for adult ears, Temüjin still caught fragments. The Tatars making trouble in the east, new tensions between tribes, rumors of shifting allegiances. These murmurs swirled around him like faint smoke, uncertain, intangible, but impossible to ignore. And though he did not yet understand the full meaning of these signs, Temüjin felt something stirring beneath the peaceful rhythm of his life, a subtle shift in the air, like the soft rumble of distant thunder before a storm. Yasuge sensed it too. One afternoon, he called Temüjin to ride with him across a nearby ridge. It was a simple outing, nothing unusual, but Yasuge's manner carried a quiet seriousness. They rode in silence until they reached a rise overlooking a wide sweep of grasslands, where the horizon stretched in a shimmering line. "This," Yasuge said, gesturing across the view, "is the world you will inherit. Not the land alone, but the responsibilities that come with it. The clans, the families, the people. Their lives depend on leaders who do not look away." Temüjin listened, absorbing the weight of his father's words. Yasuge rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "You must learn to see more than what is in front of you. Learn to see what is coming." The wind stirred around them, brushing through the grass with a low sigh. Temüjin nodded quietly. These early lessons, spoken and unspoken, became part of him. The steppe shaped him not through sudden revelations, but through steady impressions. The wisdom of his mother, the guidance of his father, the companionship of other boys, the stories of ancestors, the vastness of the land, and the growing awareness that his life was gradually being pulled towards something larger. But childhood, for all its beauty, does not last forever. Soon, Temüjin would be thrust into challenges that would test everything he had learned. Events waited beyond the horizon, events that would upend the gentle patterns of his early years and draw him into the deeper currents of fate. For now, he remained a boy walking beneath the endless sky, unaware of how swiftly the winds of the steppe could change, and how those changes would transform not only his life, but the future of an entire world. As Temüjin grew deeper into boyhood, the world around him began to take on more shape and meaning. The steppe was no longer just a vast landscape of wind and grass. It became a place filled with relationships, alliances, and small but powerful connections that shaped a young boy's heart. Among these, none mattered more than the bonds of brotherhood, both those of blood and those chosen through friendship and loyalty. The Börte camp was alive with children during the warmest seasons. They ran barefoot through the grass, their laughter rising like birdsong into the sky. Among Temüjin's siblings, Kasar was the closest to him in age, a fierce and spirited boy with a determined streak that often contrasted Temüjin's quieter nature. Kasar had a strength that shone early. He could pull a small bow before most boys his size, and had a fearlessness that made him charge headfirst into games, challenges, and even disagreements. Temüjin admired this energy, but he did not try to imitate it. Instead, he complemented it. When Kasar ran too quickly toward trouble, Temüjin was the steady voice calling him back. When Kasar challenged the older boys to wrestling matches he had no chance of winning, Temüjin tended to his scrapes afterward. Kasar, in return, defended his older brother with fierce loyalty, quick to confront anyone who spoke too sharply to him or underestimated him. The younger brothers, Hachion and Temüjin, looked up to both of them. They often toddled after Temüjin, mimicking the way he walked, the way he examined stones or tufts of grass, the way he listened closely when elders spoke. To them, Temüjin was a calm center, gentle, patient, someone who made the often unpredictable world feel steady. And yet, it was not only his family who shaped him. Around this time, Temüjin formed one of the most important friendships of his life, a friendship that would echo through the years and influence choices too heavy for any child to foresee. His name was Jamuka. Jamuka belonged to the Jadaran clan, a group that sometimes shared grazing grounds with the Borjigin. He was a boy of sharp eyes, quick laughter, and a confidence that came naturally, as if he'd been born knowing exactly who he would become. His family travelled in a separate cluster of Gers, but their paths crossed often during migrations or seasonal gatherings. Temüjin first noticed Jamuka during a wrestling match between the boys of the two clans. Jamuka stood at the edge of the circle, watching with an intensity that matched Temüjin's own, though for very different reasons. When one boy fell and another took his place, Jamuka studied every movement, every shift in posture. Temüjin did the same, although he kept his observations to himself. Later, when the day's games ended and the adults turned their attention to evening chores, Jamuka approached Temüjin with a confidence that bordered on boldness. "You watched, but you did not wrestle," he said, his tone more curious than accusatory. Temüjin shrugged lightly. "I study first." Jamuka grinned at that. "Then study me tomorrow, and I will study you." From that small exchange, a bond formed effortlessly, as though the steppe itself recognized a connection between them. They began spending their afternoons together, riding across the plains, practicing archery with child-sized bows, and exploring the hills near the campsite. Jamuka's laughter came easily, and his stories were filled with vivid excitement. Temüjin's responses were quieter, but Jamuka seemed drawn to his calmness, just as Temüjin was drawn to Jamuka's fire. Together, they learned the beginnings of what it meant to trust another. Jamuka would challenge Temüjin to climb steeper ridges or race farther than the adults allowed. Temüjin, though cautious, found courage in Jamuka's encouragement. In return, he taught Jamuka how to read the sky for weather changes, how to move silently through tall grass, how to notice the first stirrings of animals before they emerged. One evening, after a day spent riding along a shallow river, Jamuka turned to Temüjin with a serious expression. The golden light of the setting sun cast a warm glow over his face. "Let us be Anda," he said. Temüjin knew the significance of that word. An Anda was more than a friend, an oath brother, someone bound by loyalty so deep that even blood ties could not surpass it. Becoming Anda meant pledging lifelong support, protection, and trust. He hesitated only for a moment, sensing the weight of such a promise, even at their young age. Then he nodded. Jamuka grinned broadly and clasped Temüjin's hands. "Then we are as one soul in two bodies." The wind blew softly around them, as if sealing the moment. From then on, their bond deepened. When Jamuka spoke of his dreams, of becoming a great leader among his people, of guiding clans across vast territories, Temüjin listened with steady interest. When Temüjin shared smaller, quieter hopes of helping his family, of understanding the complexities adults whispered about, Jamuka listened as well, though with a different perspective. Their strengths balanced each other in ways neither fully understood. Yet even in these peaceful days of growing closeness, the world around them continued shifting. Adults looked at the boys with a mixture of fondness and curiosity, for Jamuka's family possessed noble lineage, and Yasuge's clan held its own respected position. No one discouraged their friendship, but some whispered that such close bonds between powerful families could one day ripple outward into matters greater than childhood games. Still, those murmurs remained faint and carried no true concern, for the boys were young and destiny seemed far away. Meanwhile, Temüjin's bond with Kasar remained strong. The brothers, though different in temperament, were often found together, repairing arrows, helping with herding, or exploring streams where tiny fish darted beneath the water's surface. Jamuka joined them at times, though his visits varied depending on his clan's movements. Olin observed all these connections with careful eyes. She liked Jamuka, sensing sincerity in his loyalty, but she also knew the Steppe stories, tales of friendships that grew into rivalries as adulthood's responsibilities sharpened differences. Still, for now, she allowed her son the freedom to create his own bonds, believing that every relationship served its purpose in shaping a young heart. As Temüjin approached the edge of adolescence, these bonds, family, friendship, brotherhood, began weaving together into a strong foundation. Yet beneath that foundation, quiet tensions pulsed like a faint heartbeat. The clans spoke more often of shifting alliances, of old conflicts resurfacing. Yasuge grew less relaxed, more frequently called to settle disputes or negotiate peace. The world beyond Temüjin's childhood circle was beginning to press inward, tugging at the edges of his life. Still, the soft evenings continued. The boys gathered around fires, sharing simple meals while the aroma of roasting meat drifted into the night air. They practiced their skills beneath the moonlight, shadows dancing on the grass. They whispered about dreams and fears, their voices low and honest in the stillness of night. And though none of them could see it yet, these bonds, so gentle, so pure in youth, would one day become threads woven tightly into the fabric of Temüjin's destiny. Some would remain strong, others would unravel. Some would offer support, others would bring unbearable weight. But that future was still far on the horizon. For now, Temüjin stood beside Kasar, Hachiun, Temuge, and Jamuka as evening settled over the land, feeling the warmth of their presence and the quiet promise of connection. The sky above them stretched wide and calm, dotted with stars that shimmered like grains of silver against the dark. Childhood still held him softly, even as the world slowly prepared to change. The years that followed slid gently across the plains, bringing Temüjin closer to the threshold between childhood and youth. Though he did not yet understand the full depth of it, the world around him was shifting in ways that would soon ripple through every clan of the steppe. Summertime brought large gatherings, migrations, and long days spent alongside families from neighboring tribes. These gatherings were both social and political, moments when families exchanged goods, strengthened alliances, and observed the subtle currents of power flowing beneath the surface of everyday life. To Temüjin, these gatherings were both exciting and overwhelming. Camps that were usually spread across the land now clustered near one another, like stars drawn together in a small constellation. Gers dotted the horizon, more numerous than he was accustomed to. and the air buzzed with the sounds of visiting families. Soft greetings, bursts of laughter, low conversations spoken cautiously when adults discussed matters of importance. For a boy standing at the edge of adolescence, this world felt vast. New faces appeared around every curve of land. Horses whinnied in unfamiliar tones. Children from distant clans approached with curiosity, asking questions about his family, his skills, and the lands they travelled from. Temüjin, usually quiet, answered each with soft politeness, his eyes absorbing every detail around him. Yesugei, meanwhile, moved among the adults with the calm authority of a man well respected. When he spoke, others listened. When he nodded, they nodded in return. His presence held weight in these gatherings, for he was descended from a noble line of the Börte, a clan with deep roots stretching back generations. Temüjin watched his father carefully, studying the way he carried himself, the way he measured his words, the way he observed others with quiet vigilance. One evening, when the sun dipped behind the hills and cast long golden shadows across the camp, Yesugei called Temüjin to his side. "Walk with me," he said, his tone gentle but firm. They strode together through the tall grass, their silhouettes stretching behind them. The air smelled faintly of simmering broth and wood smoke, and the distant laughter of children drifted on the breeze. "Do you see all of this?" Yesugei asked, sweeping a hand toward the gathering of tribes. "These families, these clans, they seem peaceful now, but their peace rests on balance, a balance as delicate as a thin thread." Temüjin nodded, sensing the seriousness beneath his father's words. "Every tribe has its pride," Yesugei continued. "Every leader has his own ambitions. And while the steppe is wide enough for all of us, our desires often collide. That is why these gatherings matter. They keep our relationships strong, or warn us when cracks begin to form." Temüjin let the words settle inside him. He may not have grasped the full complexity, but he understood enough. Harmony did not come naturally. It had to be tended like a restless horse. As the gathering continued over several days, Temüjin saw what his father meant. Some clans greeted one another with warmth, exchanging gifts and news. Others maintained polite distance, their smiles thin and their eyes watchful. Alliances were strengthened through shared meals and whispered promises. Rivalries were softened through careful negotiation. Yet beneath this fragile cooperation, old grievances lingered like faint smoke impossible to ignore. Temüjin sensed how easily peace could tilt into tension, though he did not yet know how deeply those tensions would someday affect him. Jamuka and his family were present at the gathering as well. When the boys spotted each other across the open field, Jamuka ran forward with a grin so wide it lit up his entire face. Temüjin felt warmth spread through him in return. Together, they joined groups of boys from other tribes, practicing small archery contests, racing across the grasslands, and testing their strength in friendly wrestling matches. Jamuka, confident and competitive, often led the group. Temüjin followed with quiet steadiness, offering support when needed and observing the interactions between families. Even in play, he noticed subtle dynamics. Who deferred to whom? Which boys carried authority? Who watched from a distance rather than join in? One night, as a cool breeze rolled across the camp and stars flickered to life in the sky, the boys sat near a small fire, eating roasted meat and exchanging stories. Some spoke of hunts they had witnessed, others of harsh winters that had tested their clans. Jamuka boasted about a daring horse ride he had taken along a steep ridge. Temüjin listened, smiling softly, offering few stories of his own. Eventually, Jamuka nudged him. "You must have a story to tell, Temüjin," he said. "Something only you have seen." Temüjin hesitated, then spoke of a small moment, of watching a heron stand perfectly still by the river, so motionless that even the breeze seemed to pause around it. He described how the bird's patience taught him something about the quiet strength hidden beneath stillness. The boys listened, surprisingly captivated. Jamuka's eyes softened. "You see things others miss," he said. Temüjin looked away shyly, warmed by the acknowledgement. Across the camp, adults gathered around larger fires. Temüjin glanced in their direction and noticed how the men stood or sat depending on their status. Yasuge sat near the center of one group, his posture relaxed but attentive. Beside him were leaders from respected clans, men whose words carried weight. Suddenly, Temüjin realized why these gatherings mattered so deeply. They were more than celebrations or meetings. They were quiet battlegrounds where loyalty, influence, and authority were shaped without weapons or horses. Here, men traded ideas instead of blows, and the outcomes of their conversations would ripple across the plains long after the fires died out. As night deepened, women prepared warm drinks and food to share between families. Hoelun moved with graceful efficiency, offering bowls of broth to visitors and speaking kindly to their children. Temüjin noted how easily she earned respect, even among unfamiliar faces. Her presence was steady, honest, and without pretense. Many women admired her strength, though few knew the full depth of her resilience. During the gathering, Yasuge spent time speaking with Jamuka's relatives as well. Temüjin noticed this with interest. Their families shared a complicated history, one of distant kinship and intertwined lineages. Though still young, Temüjin could sense that his father saw value in encouraging connections between him and Jamuka. One afternoon, Yasuge approached Temüjin and Jamuka as they worked on carving small pieces of bone into arrowheads. "You two work well together," he said, his voice carrying both warmth and a hint of contemplation. "A friend who stands with you in childhood may become your greatest support in adulthood." Jamuka nodded proudly. Temüjin lowered his gaze modestly, yet the adults also understood that alliances were fragile. A friendship between boys did not guarantee harmony between clans. Still, it planted a seed, one that could grow into something significant if nurtured. The gathering continued with shared meals, ceremonial songs, and games that brought both joy and nostalgia. The plains echoed with the rhythm of drums, the soothing melodies of long-necked instruments, and the sound of voices carrying into the night. On the final evening, a large crowd gathered beneath the dark sky. Stars shimmered like scattered silver dust, and the moon cast a soft glow across the sea of yurts. Elders told stories of ancestors who had united tribes long ago, reminding everyone that cooperation brought strength in ways conflict never could. Temüjin listened quietly, feeling something stir within him. The stories spoke of leaders who guided their people toward unity rather than division, leaders who saw beyond their own clan's interests and embraced the steppe as one collective home. He did not yet imagine himself in such a role, but the idea touched him deeply, as though awakening a small ember inside his heart. When dawn came, the gathering dispersed slowly. Families loaded their wagons, dismantled their yurts, and said their farewells. Temüjin embraced Jamuka briefly, their foreheads touching in the simple gesture of boys who believed their friendship would last forever. "We will meet again soon," Jamuka promised. Temüjin nodded. "The steppe is wide, but not wide enough to keep us apart." As the Börte clan began their journey homeward, Temüjin looked back once more. The camp that had felt so large now seemed fragile and fleeting, like a cluster of stars breaking apart as daylight brightened the sky. He could not know how profoundly the bonds formed during this gathering would affect the course of his life, nor how drastically the coming years would test them. But for now, he carried those memories with him, like small stones in a pouch, each one a reminder of connection, loyalty, and the delicate balance that shaped the world around him. The wind moved gently across the grass, whispering through the earth as if turning a quiet page in his story. The steppe was vast, the future uncertain, but Temüjin rode forward with a heart shaped by family, friendship, and the first glimmering threads of destiny. As the Börte caravan moved away from the great tribal gathering, the steppe opened once more into its familiar vastness. Rolling grasslands, distant hills softened by haze, and a sky so wide it seemed to breathe slowly above them. Temüjin rode alongside his father for part of the journey, the steady rhythm of the pony beneath him matching the quiet rhythm of his thoughts. The gathering had left an impression on him deeper than he could articulate. He felt older somehow, more aware of the delicate ties that held the clans together, more conscious of the subtle patterns woven into everyday life. But most of all, something in him had stirred, a sense that leadership meant more than strength alone. It required clarity, patience, and a heart open to more than one's own family. The wind tugged gently at his hair as he rode, carrying whispers from the horizon. He glanced once more at his father, whose eyes scanned the distant land with the practiced ease of a man who understood both its dangers and its potential. Yasuge carried griefs Temüjin could not yet see, and hopes he rarely spoke aloud. Yet his presence remained steady, as grounding as the earth beneath their horses. "Did you enjoy the gathering?" Yasuge asked, not looking away from the horizon. Temüjin nodded. "I learned much." "Yes," Yasuge murmured. "You are beginning to see the world beyond childhood." Temüjin did not reply, but warmth settled in his chest at his father's words. In the days that followed, life on the steppe returned to its familiar rhythms. The family settled near the Onon River, a place of gently flowing water and soft glades where herds grazed peacefully. The children resumed their chores, their games, their small adventures along the riverbanks. Yet Temüjin's mind drifted often. Images of the gathering returned to him, the clusters of yurts, the interwoven families, the stories of unity among tribes. And when he thought of these things, he felt a quiet longing he did not yet know how to name. One bright morning, as the sun warmed the dew from the grass, Temüjin went walking alone toward the river. The air carried the clean scent of water and the faint fragrance of wildflowers blooming along the banks. He knelt near the edge, dipping his fingers into the cool current. Tiny ripples spread outward, disturbing the perfect reflection of the sky. He watched the ripples change shape as they travelled, and a thought touched him gently. Small actions could shape much larger paths. Holen approached quietly from behind, her steps soft but deliberate. She sat beside him without a word, letting the peace of the moment settle between them. "You've been quiet these days," she observed gently. Temüjin nodded. "I'm just thinking." "About the gathering?" He hesitated, then nodded again. Holen looked at the river, her eyes calm. "Seeing so many tribes together can make the world feel larger than before. But remember this, even great gatherings are made of many small families. Strength comes from the roots, not the branches." Temüjin absorbed her words, feeling their truth. "Father says the clans must walk carefully, or old grudges will rise again." Hoyland's face softened with both sorrow and certainty. "He is right. Our people are strong but divided. Many hold wounds that time has not healed. One wrong move, and peace can shatter like thin ice." The thought sat heavy in Temüjin's mind. Holen placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "But you, Temüjin, you see things differently. You watch, you listen, you care for the hearts around you. That is a rare gift." Temüjin looked down, shy under her praise. "One day," she continued softly, "your understanding may help bring people together." She paused, then added with quiet conviction, "The world needs more who can see beyond their own needs." Temüjin felt those words settle inside him, like seeds warming after winter. That afternoon, the children gathered near the herds, while adults repaired harnesses and tended to their horses. Kasa was practicing his archery, his expression fierce with determination. Each arrow thudded into a target made of tightly bundled reeds. Temüjin watched from a short distance, admiring his brother's strength. "You try," Kasa said suddenly, offering him the bow. Temüjin accepted it carefully. He pulled the string back, steadying his breath as their father had taught him. The arrow flew with less force than Kasa's, but it struck the target with a soft tap. Kasa grinned. "Better than yesterday." Temüjin smiled, but his thoughts still lingered on larger questions. "Kasa," he asked quietly, "do you ever think the clans will unite? All of them. Not just for gatherings, but truly unite." Kasa blinked in surprise. "Unite?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Why does it matter?" Temüjin hesitated before answering. "Because when everyone is together, there is less fear, fewer secrets, fewer old hurts waiting to rise." Kasa considered this, then shook his head with a practical simplicity Temüjin envied. "People don't think like that. They think about their herds, their families, their leaders." Then, after a pause, he added, "But maybe someone could make them see differently one day." Temüjin didn't respond, but Kasa's words stayed with him. That night, Yasuge returned from a short journey with serious news. Families gathered around the fire as he spoke of rising tensions with a neighboring tribe. Voices murmured in concern. Even the flames seemed to flicker uneasily. Temüjin listened from beside Holen, feeling the weight of each word. He realized how fragile peace truly was. A single dispute, over grazing land, stolen horses, or an old insult, could ignite conflict. And once ignited, it could spread far and fast. Later that evening, after the discussions quieted and families prepared for sleep, Temüjin stepped outside the ger. The night sky stretched above him in a deep star-filled hush. He breathed in the cool air, feeling both small under the vast heavens and strangely connected to them. He thought again of the gathering of clans, how hopeful it had felt, how harmonious. But beneath that harmony, there had been fractures, almost invisible yet unmistakable. Something inside him whispered that the steppe could be more than a field of competing families. It could be one people, if guided with clarity and courage. These were not childish imaginings anymore. They were the early stirrings of a vision. A quiet vision, still fragile, still forming. A vision of unity. A vision of stronger bonds between families. A vision of a land where the clans did not have to fear each other. Yet Temüjin was young. He did not know how such a dream could ever be realized. He only felt the truth of it, like a distant echo carried on the wind. He lifted his eyes toward the eternal blue sky, its shimmering presence both comforting and immense. The sky had watched countless generations rise, thrive, and fall. It had seen peace and conflict, harmony and division. And as Temüjin stood beneath it, he felt a quiet certainty settle into his bones. One day, the steppe would need someone who could see beyond division, someone who could mend what was broken, someone who could bring scattered families together. He did not imagine himself as that person, not yet. But the wind moved softly around him, almost as if acknowledging the thought. Holen stepped out behind him, her robe rustling gently. She followed his gaze upward and rested a hand on his back. "The sky watches," she whispered. Temüjin nodded. "And one day," she added, "you will understand what it asks of you." The night deepened. The stars glittered, and a faint breeze rolled across the plains, carrying the first quiet hints of a destiny that would one day reshape the world. The quiet dream of unity that had begun to stir within Temüjin's young heart continued to flicker softly in the months that followed, growing brighter with each small moment of awareness. Yet the world around him remained unchanged on the surface. Tribes moving with the seasons, families tending their herds, and the rhythm of life unfolding with the gentle steadiness of the steppe itself. But beneath this familiar calm, deeper shifts had begun. Shifts not only within Temüjin, but within the greater fabric of the land. It was a time when small choices carried long echoes, when relationships became foundations for futures unknown, and when the first quiet signs of a leader's spirit began to reveal themselves in subtle ways. Temüjin was now approaching the age when Mongol boys began to step more firmly into responsibility. Though still young, he was no longer shielded from the complexities that shaped the adult world. He accompanied his father more often, observed clan discussions with sharpened focus, and helped in tasks that required careful judgment rather than simple obedience. The days of carefree childhood were fading gently, making room for something new. One soft morning, when the sun had only just risen and cast gold across the plains, Yasuge called Temüjin to ride with him. The air was cool, and the horses snorted small clouds of mist into the breeze. Temüjin mounted quickly, sensing that the ride carried purpose. They rode side by side, moving across the undulating land in comfortable silence. Birds swept low over the grass, and the faint murmur of distant streams followed them, as if guiding their path. After some time, Yasuge spoke. "You have grown," he said, his voice steady. "Not just in height, but in spirit. I see it." Temüjin looked forward, unsure how to respond. Yasuge continued. "A boy becomes a young man not by his years, but by the weight of his thoughts. You are beginning to think like someone who sees more than himself." Temüjin felt warmth rising in his chest. "I try to understand." "Yes," his father murmured, And that is the beginning. They rode farther until they reached a small ridge overlooking a wide valley. Herds grazed peacefully below, their silhouettes moving like small ripples against the landscape. Beyond them lay the distant haze of another clan's territory. Yasuge gestured across the horizon. Do you remember what I told you before? That leaders must see more than what is in front of them. Temüjin nodded. Good, Yasuge said softly, because today you will meet a family whose bond may shape your future. Temüjin blinked, surprised. Before he could ask more, a small group appeared in the distance, a cluster of riders moving steadily toward them. As they approached, Temüjin recognized them not as warriors or elders, but as another family, modest yet respectable in appearance. At the front rode a man with a dignified posture and a calm, observant gaze. Beside him rode a girl a few years younger than Temüjin. Her eyes were dark and steady, her posture poised, and her movements graceful even on horseback. Behind them followed a handful of relatives who travelled with the air of people carrying both pride and humility. Yasuge gave Temüjin a meaningful look. This, he said quietly, is the family of Desechen, and the girl is Börte. Temüjin's breath caught slightly, though he did not know why. He had heard her name before, spoken once during the great gatherings of clans. Börte was known even at her young age for her quiet intelligence, her gentle spirit, and a presence that drew respect from those who met her. The riders halted before Yasuge and Temüjin. Desechen dismounted first, greeting Yasuge with warmth and mutual respect. It is good to see you, Yasuge, Desechen said. And you, Yasuge replied. Your journey was smooth? Smooth enough? Desechen answered, smiling. Their conversation flowed easily, filled with the courtesy expected between respected men. Temüjin remained quietly by his father's side, unsure how to position himself in this moment. But as he stood there, he felt Börte's gaze resting on him with soft curiosity. Finally, Desechen motioned to her gently. Börte, come forward. She stepped closer, her steps graceful on the soft earth. Temüjin felt unexpectedly aware of himself, of his posture, his clothing, the way his hands rested at his sides. But more than that, he sensed a stillness in her presence that felt both calming and quietly powerful. Yasuge placed a hand on Temüjin's shoulder. This is my son, Temüjin. Börte dipped her head in a polite gesture. It is good to meet you. Temüjin nodded, finding his voice. And you. Their exchange was brief and simple, yet something in it lingered, a gentle connection that neither fully understood, but which carried the unmistakable sense of significance. As the adults discussed clan matters, grazing rights, and future cooperation, Temüjin and Börte were encouraged to walk a short distance together. They moved slowly, accompanied by the soft wind pushing through the grass. For a while, neither spoke, but the silence between them felt easy, not strained. Finally, Börte glanced at him. Your father says you see things clearly, she said. He says you are thoughtful. Temüjin blinked, surprised. He said that? She nodded. My father respects him greatly. He listens when Yasuge speaks. Temüjin felt a quiet sense of gratitude, not just toward his father, but toward this girl who seemed to understand the meaning of such words. They walked farther, pausing near a small cluster of wildflowers. Börte knelt to touch one of the blossoms lightly with her fingertips. "Our land is beautiful," she murmured. Temüjin nodded. "Yes, but it is fragile," she added, almost as if speaking to the wind. "I hear many adults whisper of divisions between clans. I do not like it." Temüjin looked at her closely. "I don't like it either." She turned her head, meeting his eyes. There was something thoughtful in her gaze, something steady, something that felt older than her years. "My father believes the clans can be strong together," she said, "but only if someone is brave enough to lead them." Temüjin felt his breath catch softly. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the distant horizon, where the sky met the open plains in a slow, graceful line. "If someone could bring them together," he said quietly, "we would be stronger than any storm." Börte considered his words, then smiled gently. "Maybe one day someone will." The breeze moved around them, lifting strands of Börte's hair and carrying the faint scent of summer grass. It felt as though the steppe itself paused to listen. After a while, they returned to their families. Daiseshin and Yasuge spoke quietly, their tones carrying a warmth that suggested deeper intention. And indeed, behind their conversation lay an important decision, one that would shape Temüjin's future far more than he understood. When they parted ways, Yasuge and Temüjin began their ride home. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the land in soft amber light. Temüjin rode in silence for a long time, replaying every moment with Börte, her calm voice, her thoughtful eyes, her insights that mirrored his own. At last, Yasuge spoke. "Temüjin," he said gently, "you are approaching the age when alliances become necessary, not just for clans, but for individuals." He paused. "Today I spoke with Daiseshin. We have agreed that you and his daughter Börte will be promised in marriage." Temüjin felt the world shift slightly, not in fear, but in an unexpected quiet clarity. He did not know what marriage meant beyond the stories told around the fire. He did not know what his life would look like years from now. But he remembered Börte's steady gaze, her thoughts on unity, her quiet strength. And for reasons he could not explain, he felt at peace. Yasuge continued. "She is a good match, a strong spirit, a thoughtful heart. Her family will be a strong ally." He turned toward Temüjin. "And I saw how she looked at you." Temüjin lowered his gaze, warmth rising through him. "Do you accept this promise?" Yasuge asked softly. Temüjin took a slow breath. Then he nodded. "Yes, father." Yasuge's expression softened. "That is good," he said. As they rode on, the sky deepened to shades of rose and violet. The air cooled, and the first evening stars appeared faintly above. Temüjin lifted his eyes to the vast sky, the eternal blue sky that watched him, guided him, and connected everything. Beneath its endless reach, he felt something awaken in him, something subtle yet profound. Perhaps it was the beginning of understanding what leadership truly meant. Perhaps it was the first quiet spark of a destiny still hidden beyond the horizon. Or perhaps it was simply the realization that he was no longer walking the path of childhood alone. Whatever it was, it settled gently within him, like a seed carried on the wind, waiting for the right season to bloom. And as the plains stretched endlessly ahead, Temüjin felt for the first time the earliest whisper of a title that one day would echo across nations. Khan. Not yet, not for many years. But the first quiet steps toward that future had begun. The seasons rolled onward, shifting softly across the vast Mongolian steppe. The promise made between Temüjin and Börte rested quietly in the background of daily life, an agreement sealed not only by families, but by the gentle certainty Temüjin felt whenever he recalled her steady gaze. Yet even as this bond formed a hopeful thread in the tapestry of his future, the world around him began to reveal deeper, more complicated patterns. Temüjin's days were filled with new responsibilities. He tended the herds with greater skill, helped prepare food for winter, and learned how to mend tools and harnesses with patient care. His hands grew stronger, his posture steadier, and adults watched him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Yasuge included him in more discussions, testing not only his strength, but his judgment. One cool morning, as the camp awakened beneath pale sunlight, Yasuge asked Temüjin to join a small group of men on a brief journey. Their task was simple: visit neighboring families to confirm recent agreements on grazing routes. Yet Temüjin sensed that the journey carried a deeper purpose. They rode in silence at first, their horses' hooves pressing soft impressions into the earth. The air smelled of frost and dry grass, and thin clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Temüjin kept close to his father, observing the men around them. Each carried a bow and a quiver of arrows, not because a battle was expected, but because travel across the steppe was never free of risk. After several hours, they reached a small cluster of gers belonging to another branch of the Borjigin. Temüjin watched his father interact with the elders there, how Yasuge listened more than he spoke, how he offered respect even when disagreements quietly simmered beneath polite words. Temüjin noticed the importance of tone, posture, and patience. Leadership, he observed, was not a loud voice, but a steady one. As they left the camp, Yasuge spoke quietly to him. "Every clan carries its own burdens," he said. "If you hope to guide others one day, you must first understand them." Temüjin nodded, absorbing the lesson like warm sunlight. Over the following months, Temüjin joined more such journeys, some short, some demanding longer travel across the vast plains. These early experiences were not battles nor bold conquests, but the quiet beginnings of leadership. Learning the land, the people, and the delicate patterns of diplomacy that held them together. Sometimes, small conflicts arose, disputes over straying animals, misunderstandings about boundaries, or old grievances resurfacing in tense words. These moments gave Temüjin his first true tests. He watched how Yasuge calmed voices before they rose, how he guided conversations back toward harmony, and how he treated each man not as an opponent, but as someone with a story behind his eyes. These lessons settled deeply into Temüjin's spirit. One evening, after a long day of travel, the group made camp near a quiet river. The water moved softly, reflecting the pale glow of moonlight. Temüjin sat beside the fire, warming his hands as the men prepared their meal. Yasuge approached and sat beside him. His face appeared thoughtful, the firelight dancing across the lines etched by years of responsibility. "Temüjin," he said gently, "you have begun to see the world not just with your eyes, but with your understanding. That is good." Temüjin looked up, surprised by the praise. "But," Yasuge continued, "there is something else you must learn." Temüjin waited quietly. Strength is not always shown through force. Many believe power comes from the bow or the sword, but lasting power, lasting influence, comes from how you treat others. People follow not only strength but fairness. Loyalty grows from trust. Temüjin took in these words with a seriousness beyond his years. He nodded slowly. "I want to guide well, father." Yasuge placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "And you will, if you continue to listen." The night passed peacefully, the river flowing softly nearby. Temüjin fell asleep beneath stars that shimmered like distant embers, unaware that these early journeys were laying the first stones of a path he would walk for the rest of his life. As the next season approached, the clans gathered once more, not in celebration this time, but in quiet concern. Rumors of unfamiliar riders had been drifting across the plains, whispers carried by traders who had passed through distant lands. Some spoke of the Tatars stirring. Others mentioned small raids far from Borjigin territory. Temüjin listened from the shadows of Ger flaps, turning each fragment of information over in his mind. Conflict was a constant possibility on the steppe, but even a child could sense when the wind carried a different tone, one of unease. One afternoon, Yasuge gathered several men and prepared to ride out to investigate a rumor concerning a group of strangers camping near a trade route. He did not take Temüjin on this journey, and though Temüjin did not question his father's decision, he felt the weight of worry settle inside him. The men returned 2 days later, not harmed, but somber. "It was nothing serious," Yasuge told Hoelun, "but something feels different this season." The adults spoke in low voices, their words drifting like faint smoke on a breeze Temüjin couldn't quite interpret. Yet something inside him sensed a quiet shift, like a calm river whose undercurrent was beginning to strengthen. But life, as it often did, continued with its gentle cycles. The herds moved, children played. The sky stretched endlessly above them, patient and unchanging. Still, Temüjin now felt more awake to the world's fragile balance. He noticed small signs, a cluster of riders passing unusually quickly across the plains, an unfamiliar group near the riverbank, a quiet tension in the voices of elders. These observations stirred a deeper awareness within him, one that had been growing since he first understood the divisions between clans. One crisp morning, Temüjin rode alone along a hill ridge, the wind brushing lightly against his face. The view below stretched in soft waves of green and gold. He paused, watching a distant caravan move across the plains. Their slow, steady progress reminded him that the steppe was not isolated. It was connected to faraway lands, each with its own stories, its own struggles. He wondered what lay beyond the familiar horizon. He wondered how those distant lives shaped the future of his people. He wondered whether someone, somewhere, was having the same thoughts he was. Thoughts of unity, of strength in collaboration, of a land bound not by conflict, but by shared purpose. As he pondered these things, the wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of hoofbeats. Temüjin turned to see a rider approaching, a young man from a nearby clan. "Temüjin!" the rider called. "Your father is gathering men. There is news." Temüjin nodded and followed quickly. When he reached camp, Yasuge stood at the center, surrounded by elders and warriors. Their expressions were neither fearful nor frantic, but determined. Temüjin felt the air shift with a quiet intensity. A young scout stepped forward. "There are strangers near our western border, not raiding, but watching. We believe they are testing the lands." Temüjin felt his stomach tighten. This was not a battle, not even a skirmish, but it was a moment that required attention, a small ripple in the wide fabric of the steppe. Yasuge turned to Temüjin, his eyes steady. "You will not ride with us this time," he said softly. "But listen well. Times like these shape leaders. What you hear today will matter." Temüjin bowed his head, accepting the decision. As the men rode out, Temüjin watched them disappear into the distance. His heart beat with a quiet, growing urgency. He wished he could ride with them, not for glory, but to understand, to see firsthand the world that was slowly revealing itself. Hours passed. The sky shifted from pale blue to golden afternoon light. Finally, the riders returned, calm and unharmed. The situation, Yasuge explained, had been resolved peacefully. The strangers were travelers seeking passage, not threats. Still, the moment left an impression. That night, Temüjin sat alone near the fire, listening to the crackle of burning wood. He felt the weight of change, not as fear, but as quiet anticipation. The steppe was awakening. New stories were entering its winds, and he knew, deep within, that even these small encounters were preparing him for larger trials to come. He did not see himself yet as a leader, but something within him knew he would walk toward responsibility. Not in haste, but in steady steps guided by patience, observation, and a growing understanding of the land's fragile balance. The fire glowed softly, lighting his thoughtful face. Above him, the eternal blue sky stretched wide and deep, as if watching with gentle expectation. The first whispers of movement had begun. Sometime far in the future, they would grow into storms. But for now, they remained gentle, distant murmurs. Early campaigns not of war, but of awareness, preparation, and the shaping of a young spirit destined to rise. As another year unfolded across the steppe, Temüjin found himself increasingly aware of a world far larger than the one he had known in childhood. The open plains had always felt vast, but now they seemed to stretch toward distant lands filled with mysteries he could only imagine. The subtle shifts he sensed through rumors and scattered encounters began to take shape through the arrival of traders. Small caravans that wove their way across the grasslands, bringing glimpses of faraway kingdoms, unfamiliar customs, and stories that broadened the edges of Temüjin's understanding. These caravans did not travel often, nor were they large. Sometimes only a few pack animals and 2 or 3 travelers appeared along the horizon, moving steadily with a patience earned from long journeys. Yet their arrival always stirred a quiet curiosity among the clans. Children gathered at a respectful distance, watching the travelers unpack their goods. Adults greeted them with cautious hospitality, offering shelter, food, and warmth in exchange for information and the occasional trade. One late afternoon, as the steppe glowed beneath the gentle light of an approaching sunset, a small group of traders arrived near the Börte camp. Temüjin had just finished tending to the horses with his brothers when he saw the figures approaching. A man leading 2 camels, their soft footfalls raising small clouds of dust, and another riding a sturdy horse with a woven cloth draped across its back. The merchants wore robes of muted colours, dusted with signs of long travel, and their faces carried both fatigue and quiet resilience. Temüjin approached with calm curiosity, standing beside Yasuge as the traders bowed respectfully. "You have journeyed far," Yasuge remarked. The elder merchant nodded. From the west, great Yasuge, through many lands. The words carried weight. Lands beyond the familiar plains, lands Temüjin had only heard small whispers about. The merchants were invited into a gyre where warm broth and meat were prepared. Temüjin and Kasar exchanged glances of excitement. Moments like these were rare, and they understood that stories from beyond the horizon were gifts to be treasured. When the evening settled and the sky deepened to a quiet indigo, the traders began to share their tales. The adults listened carefully, while the children clustered near the entrance of the gyre, their faces lit by the gentle glow of firelight. "We have passed through the lands near the Great Wall," one merchant said, his voice calm and measured. "Towering stones that rise and stretch farther than the eye can see." Temüjin felt a thrill spark inside him. A wall so vast that it reached across the land? It was difficult to imagine. The steppe was open, boundless, free of such structures. The idea of something so permanent, so unmoving, stirred a quiet wonder within him. Another trader continued. Beyond that, markets filled with spices, silk and tools of bronze and iron. People speak many languages. Their houses stand close together, made of carved stone or painted wood. The images painted in Temüjin's mind were vivid. Streets filled with colour, strange scents drifting in the air, voices blending in a chorus of unfamiliar words. He pictured merchants haggling over silk dyed in deep reds and blues, artisans bending metal into tools or ornaments, children playing between buildings unlike any he had seen. Kasar, sitting beside him, whispered, "Do you think it is true?" Temüjin nodded. The world must be larger than our skies. Later, the merchants described lands farther still. Kingdoms where rulers wore crowns of gold, cities surrounded by high walls, and rivers so wide they looked like silver roads stretching into the distance. They spoke of deserts where caravans travelled under scorching suns, of mountains crowned with snow that never melted, and of forests so thick that daylight barely touched the ground. Temüjin listened with a quiet intensity, absorbing every detail. Each story felt like a small lantern illuminating parts of a map he had not known existed. The more he learned, the more he understood how little the tribes of the steppe truly saw of the world. When the merchants presented some of their goods, small carved ornaments, fragments of silk, strange coins from distant markets, Temüjin studied them carefully. The fabric felt smooth and cool against his fingers. The coins, etched with unfamiliar symbols, carried a weight that made him wonder about the hands that had passed them through the years. One of the men noticed Temüjin's thoughtful gaze. "The world is large, young one," he said gently, "but distance means little to those who carry courage." Temüjin lowered his eyes shyly, but the words stayed with him. Over the next days, the merchants rested with the clan, sharing more stories. Temüjin helped care for their animals, listening as they spoke of the Silk Road, an immense network of paths that connected lands both near and unimaginably far. He learned of cities where thousands of people lived together, of oasis towns where caravans gathered for safety, and of markets bustling with so many voices that the air itself seemed to vibrate. Hoelun observed Temüjin's interest with a soft smile. "The world is wide," she said one evening, "and every place has its own hopes and struggles, but never forget that the heart is the same everywhere." Temüjin nodded, touched by her words. As the caravan prepared to depart, the leader of the traders approached Yasuge with a thoughtful expression. "The lands beyond your horizon grow restless," he said. "There are kingdoms seeking to expand their influence. There are regions caught between them. And the tribes of the steppe, they are spoken of as fierce, proud, divided." Yasuge listened closely. The merchant added quietly, "Unity would make your people strong. Many lands fear the strength of united tribes." Temüjin's breath caught softly. A familiar spark stirred within him, an echo of thoughts he had held since childhood. When the traders finally rode away, Temüjin watched them vanish into the shimmering morning light, feeling a sense of both loss and inspiration. Their stories had widened his understanding of the world, showing him how small the steppe truly was in the grand tapestry of lands and peoples. Over the next weeks, Temüjin found himself thinking more deeply. He walked to the ridge overlooking the plains and imagined the caravans moving across distant lands. He pictured markets bustling with life, walls stretching across mountains, and rivers carrying boats from one kingdom to the next. He wondered how these places interacted, how leaders held their people together, and how unity shaped the fate of nations. One evening, as the sky darkened to rich blue and stars flickered across the heavens, Temüjin spoke with Jamuka, who had visited once more with his family. "The world beyond the steppe is large," Temüjin said softly. "Larger than I ever imagined." Jamuka smiled faintly. "Then it is a world waiting to be known." Temüjin looked at him. "Do you think our people could ever be part of something greater? Not only herders or warriors, but something more?" Jamuka considered the question, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Why not?" he replied. "Greatness comes to those who seek it. The clans simply need a guide." The breeze moved softly between them, carrying the scents of wood smoke and cooling earth. Temüjin gazed up at the sky, the same sky that stretched over distant kingdoms, winding rivers and bustling markets. He felt small beneath it, but not powerless. For the first time, he understood that the world's vastness did not diminish the steppe. It simply revealed how much potential rested within its people. The caravans had left, but their stories remained, settling into Temüjin's heart like seeds awaiting their season. And though he did not yet know it, the understanding he gained from those distant horizons would one day shape decisions with consequences far beyond the steppe. Decisions that would echo across continents. Decisions that would turn a dream of unity into something far greater. The stories Temüjin had heard from the wandering merchants lingered in his thoughts long after their caravan faded into the horizon. They opened windows to worlds he had never imagined. Lands of stone cities, marketplaces woven with colour, and rulers who governed with complex systems, far different from the loose alliances of the Mongol clans. These tales stirred something quiet yet powerful inside him. A sense that the steppe was part of a far greater web of lands, where decisions made in distant kingdoms might one day ripple back across the plains. As seasons turned and Temüjin continued to grow, more traders crossed near Börte territory, each bringing new stories that stretched his imagination. Many came from the west, landscapes marked by deserts, oasis towns, fortified walls, and flourishing trade routes. These merchants often spoke of a sprawling region called Khwarezm, a land of sun-baked earth, winding caravan paths, and cities that shone like jewels in the sand. Temüjin listened to every detail with the attentiveness of someone who sensed that knowledge carried its own quiet strength. Khwarezm, they explained, was a crossroads where traders from many kingdoms converged. Silk from the east, spices from the south, precious metals from the mountains, and crafted goods from distant lands all moved through its markets. The great cities, places like Urgench, Bukhara, and Samarkand, were alive with activity from dawn until deep into the night, each corner humming with voices, music, and the steady pulse of trade. The merchants described buildings painted in blues and golds, towering minarets, and courtyards shaded by carved wooden beams. They spoke of scholars who gathered to debate ideas, of artisans who spent years perfecting a single craft, and of rulers who maintained order through intricate networks of governance. To Temüjin, raised beneath an endless sky where the land itself was the only boundary, these descriptions were both strange and captivating. One evening, Temüjin asked one of the merchants, "What is it like to travel through those lands?" The merchant, a man with gentle eyes and a sun-weathered face, smiled. "It is like walking through a dream," he said. "Long roads of sand, towns rising like mirages, markets filled with colours you have never seen before, and people, so many people, that you forget what silence sounds like." Temüjin imagined it, the sound of thousands of footsteps, the scent of spices, the glow of lanterns at dusk. The steppe, with all its serenity, felt far away from such busy places. Yet he sensed the deep connection. The goods traded in Khwarezm often came from or passed through the routes that brushed the edges of Mongol land. Their worlds were not separate. They touched at the edges like neighbouring clouds. News of Khwarezm also brought lessons about power. The merchants spoke of rulers who commanded armies large enough to protect their vast trade networks. They described treaties held together by careful diplomacy and conflicts sparked by misunderstandings or changes in leadership. Temüjin listened closely. He began to see how a land could grow strong through unity, how cooperation created stability, and how even distant kingdoms depended on the decisions of a few. These stories deepened Temüjin's quiet longing for harmony among his own people. The steppe was beautiful, but fragile in its divisions. If distant lands could thrive through cohesion, why not the tribes of the plains? One spring, a larger caravan arrived, carrying fabrics, spices, and small metal ornaments etched with delicate patterns. Their leader was a dignified man with a calm voice, and he offered gifts to the clan out of respect for Yesugei's reputation. That evening, around a warm fire, the man shared tales from the Khwarezm frontier, stories of deserts that stretched like oceans of golden sand, of strong winds that shaped the dunes into shifting patterns, and of caravans travelling slowly beneath a sun so bright that even shadows seemed to shimmer. Temüjin listened with quiet fascination. The trader spoke of Samarkand, a city of gardens and shimmering blue tiles. "Water flows through channels in the ground," he said, "bringing life to orchards and flowers. At night, the stars reflect in the pools, as if the sky has dipped to touch the earth." Temüjin imagined the sight, a city illuminated not by fire, but by moonlit water. It felt almost magical. The trader then described the fortified markets of Bukhara, where artisans hammered metal into delicate filigree and scribes copied manuscripts by the light of oil lamps. He spoke of Urgench, where goods from across Asia were collected before continuing along the Silk Road. These stories revealed a world connected by purpose, trade, and cooperation. Later, the trader turned toward Temüjin, studying him with a look of thoughtful curiosity. "Young man," he said gently, "if you ever travel west, you will see how lands grow strong when people work together." Even the largest desert cannot separate those bound by shared purpose. Temüjin bowed his head respectfully. I would like to learn. The merchant smiled. Then you are already on the path. As the caravan rested at the Börte camp over the next 2 days, Temüjin helped the traders tend to their camels. He learned how the animals carried heavy loads across long distances, how they survived with little water, and how they moved steadily even in strong winds. He asked questions, not eagerly but thoughtfully, about how caravans prepared for journeys, how they protected themselves, and how they navigated the vastness of the frontier. One trader showed him a worn map, hand-drawn with lines marking routes between cities. The parchment was faded, but Temüjin saw the lines stretching out like veins across a living body. This, the trader explained, is how the world connects. Every path leads somewhere. Every choice creates a direction. Temüjin traced a finger near the edge, imagining the openness beyond the markings. When the caravan finally departed, Temüjin stood on a small rise and watched them disappear. The animals moved in a long, curving line. Dust rose behind them like a soft veil drawn across the land. He felt a mixture of awe and longing. The world was broader than he could have imagined, and within it, the steppe held a place not small or isolated, but essential. A crossroads of winds and roots and stories carried from one horizon to another. As he walked back toward camp, he noticed the sky glowing with soft dusk colors, rose, amber, and fading gold. The steppe lay peaceful before him, its grasses swaying in a rhythm older than any kingdom. The distant lands of Khwarezm felt far away, yet something in Temüjin's heart now felt connected to them. Their stories had woven into his understanding, showing him that unity brought prosperity, not only in exotic markets, but in the quiet success of people working together. He understood now, more clearly than before, that the steppe's divisions left the clans vulnerable. The tribes needed strength, not the strength of force alone, but of cooperation, trust, and shared destiny. That night, as he lay beneath a sky filled with stars that stretched infinitely in every direction, Temüjin felt a quiet certainty. The steppe was ready for change. And one day, someone would guide it. He did not yet think of himself as that person, but the sky, ancient and patient, seemed to watch him with the soft expectation of a world waiting for new possibilities. The winds carried no storm yet, only whispers, soft, distant murmurs from the horizons of Khwarezm, hinting at the vastness of the world Temüjin was slowly beginning to understand. The stories of distant cities and bustling markets lingered in Temüjin's thoughts long after the caravans faded into the horizon. Each tale woven by the traders of shimmering deserts, crowded bazaars, and powerful kingdoms stretched his understanding of what a nation could be. They were lands held together not only by walls and wealth, but by shared purpose. Lands where unity gave strength, where cooperation brought prosperity. Back on the steppe, the world seemed quieter, yet no less meaningful. The wide plains carried their own wisdom, whispered in the murmur of grass and the steady sway of herds. But Temüjin now sensed something more beneath the familiar rhythm of life, a gentle stirring, a feeling that change was possible, perhaps even necessary. The vision forming inside him was still soft, like an unfledged bird barely opening its eyes, yet it fluttered with quiet insistence. Life continued its gentle cycle, seasons turned, families moved their camps. Rivers thawed and froze again. But Temüjin observed everything with a clearer gaze. He began to notice how families worked together during migrations, how a helping hand during a difficult climb or a shared fire during a cold night strengthened bonds between groups. These small acts of unity hinted at what the entire steppe might achieve if guided by a stronger purpose. He also saw how quickly harmony could falter when misunderstandings arose. A rumor about stolen animals could send shadows across a gathering. A careless insult between two hot-headed young men could ripple outward toward their families. These moments pained Temüjin, not because they surprised him, but because they revealed how fragile peace truly was. One early summer morning, he woke to gentle sunlight streaming through the felt walls of the yurt. Outside, the air was crisp, and the smell of dew-laden grass drifted in. Holin was already preparing morning broth. Her movements were calm, efficient, and familiar. "Sit, Temüjin," she said softly when she saw him rise. "You have much on your mind these days." He sat beside her, inhaling the warm scent of milk and herbs. "Mother, do you think the clans could ever stand together? Not just for gatherings, but truly united?" Holin looked at him with eyes full of quiet understanding. "The clans follow the winds of their leaders," she replied. "If a leader carries harmony in his heart, others will feel it." Temüjin considered her words. "And if a leader carries fear?" he asked. "Then fear spreads," Holin said gently. "But you, Temüjin, you do not carry fear, you carry hope." He lowered his eyes, humbled. Later that day, Yasuge returned from a meeting with nearby allies. His expression held the calm seriousness that often accompanied important discussions. Temüjin sensed that something had shifted. "Come," Yasuge said, motioning for him to walk toward a small rise overlooking the plains. They stood side by side, the wind brushing softly across their clothes. From this vantage point, the grasslands stretched far into the distance, shimmering under the midday sun. "Temüjin," Yasuge began, "the clans are uneasy. Whispers move across the land, of tension, of opportunity, of change. The steppe is stirring, not loudly, but persistently." Temüjin waited, listening. "There will come a time," Yasuge said slowly, "when the tribes must choose their future. Whether they walk together or remain divided will shape everything." Temüjin felt a quiet tremor of realization. "Who will guide them?" he asked softly. Yasuge turned to him with a look that carried both pride and caution. "That is not for me to say, but I have seen your heart, Temüjin. You do not think only of yourself or your own clan. You look toward the whole horizon." Temüjin's breath caught, not from pride, but from the weight of the words. "You listen," Yasuge continued. "You observe, you learn. These qualities build trust, and trust is the foundation of leadership." The words settled deeply within Temüjin, like stones placed carefully to strengthen a path. As the days passed, he walked with a newfound quiet purpose. He spent more time with the elders, listening to their stories of past Khans, men who had risen not through violence alone, but through wisdom and fairness. He observed how disagreements between families were handled, how each clan carried its own customs, and how fragile alliances balanced between cooperation and conflict. He also nurtured the bonds he already held. His brothers remained close to him, especially Kasa, whose loyalty burned bright and fierce. Temüga and Hachyun sought his reassurance during storms or long nights, and Temüjin guided them gently, remembering how his mother had always anchored him with calmness. Jamuka too continued to visit when their clans crossed paths during migrations. Their friendship remained strong, a connection built not through competition, but through shared dreams and mutual respect. They spoke often of their futures, of the people they wished to become, of the world they might shape. One evening, as they sat near a small fire beneath a sky awash with stars, Jamuka said quietly, "A leader must inspire loyalty. He must be someone others want to follow." Temüjin nodded, "But loyalty must be earned, not demanded." Jamuka smiled faintly. "You think too deeply," he teased gently. "And you think too quickly," Temüjin replied with a soft grin. Their bond was effortless, natural, a friendship that felt like a piece of the steppe itself, open, steady, and enduring. Yet even in these peaceful moments, Temüjin sensed small shifts between them, subtle differences in how Jamuka spoke of leadership, of destiny, of the clan's future. Jamuka envisioned a leader lifted high by noble lineage and strength. Temüjin imagined a leader raised by unity and fairness. These were not opposing dreams yet, only early shadows of different paths. As the months passed, Temüjin became more involved in clan matters. He learned how to judge the health of herds, how to identify safe pasture lands, how to read the sky for signs of storms. He practiced archery with growing skill, trained with small groups of boys, and helped lead younger ones across difficult terrain. The adults began to look to him with something new in their eyes. Not just fondness, but expectation. Quiet recognition. One day, during a long migration, a dispute broke out between two families over grazing rights. Voices rose, tension flared, and the air seemed to tighten like a drawn bow. Before Yasuge intervened, Temüjin stepped forward, not forcefully, but calmly. He listened to both sides, asking gentle questions, seeking the root of the disagreement. He suggested a simple compromise. The families could alternate grazing areas over a set number of days, ensuring both herds had access to fresh grass. At first, the men resisted, but Temüjin remained steady, his voice soft yet clear. Eventually they agreed, their anger ebbing. Later, Yasuge approached him quietly. "You handled that well," he said. Temüjin shrugged, embarrassed. "I only wanted them to stop arguing." "Yes," Yasuge replied, "but you did more than that. You helped them hear each other." The praise warmed Temüjin's heart. Yet he felt no pride, only a deep sense of purpose, as if he had taken one small step towards something larger. That night, beneath a sky spread with stars like scattered silver, Temüjin lay awake, listening to the wind brushing gently against the gyre. It carried distant scents, cool earth, moving water, and something else, possibility. He thought of the steppe, its beauty, its fragility, its potential. He thought of the clans, each carrying their own strengths and fears. He thought of the distant lands he had learned about, Khwarezm, China, kingdoms tied by cooperation and shared destiny. He thought of Börte, whose calm presence had stayed with him even in her absence, and of the promise their families had forged. And he thought of the future, still far away, still unwoven, but shimmering with quiet promise. A world in motion under many banners. Yet Temüjin sensed, with a calm certainty, that the steppe's greatest strength would someday be found under one. Not a banner stitched of conquest or force, but of unity, of trust, of shared hope. The night deepened, the stars glowed brighter, the wind whispered gently across the plains, and Temüjin, drifting into a peaceful sleep, felt the quiet beginning of something rising inside him, something steady, patient, and strong. A calling, not loud, not urgent, but unmistakable. The winds of the steppe were beginning to shift, though softly, so softly that only those who listened closely could sense the change. Temüjin was one of them. As he grew into early manhood, the world around him seemed to deepen in texture and meaning. He noticed more. The way a herd moved as one across a plain, the subtle tones in men's voices during negotiations, the quiet tension that sometimes lingered beneath the surface of gatherings. And he noticed how often stories from faraway lands drifted into their camps like wandering embers carried by travelers along the great silk roads. These stories painted images of movement, endless caravans traveling across deserts, mountains, and forests, bearing fabrics of shimmering color, spices that perfumed the air, and knowledge that traveled more quietly than goods. They described a world woven by roots that stretched like ribbons across continents, connecting kingdoms and people who would never meet, yet whose lives touched through trade, conversation, and shared needs. Temüjin found himself lingering near each new group of traders that passed by, not out of idle curiosity, but out of a growing awareness that these travelers carried something precious: understanding of lands beyond the steppe, of systems different from clan life, of the quiet ways cooperation created stability. One late spring afternoon, a caravan arrived larger than most, 6 camels, 2 horses pulling a cart, and several men wrapped in robes of light fabric suited for warm climates. Their faces were lined by sun and wind, their eyes alert yet peaceful. They carried with them long bundles wrapped in silk and wooden boxes bound with leather straps. Yasuge welcomed them with the steady hospitality expected from a respected leader. As they entered the camp, Temüjin watched closely, sensing that these visitors held stories that could widen his understanding even further. That evening, after the traders had eaten and rested, they began to speak of their journey. Temüjin sat among the listeners, just close enough to see the traders' expressions in the flickering firelight. One man, his voice low and rhythmic, described traveling through the Gobi Desert, where winds sculpted the sand into endless waves. In the heat of day, he said, the horizon shimmers like water, but there is none. At night, the sky blazes with stars so bright they seem to fall from the heavens. Another described the bustling markets of Dunhuang, where monks copied manuscripts in cool stone chambers and where travelers rested before continuing along the Silk Road's many branching routes. He spoke of oasis towns, where merchants gathered like migrating birds, sharing food and stories, under palm trees that rose like small green miracles from the dry earth. Temüjin's imagination filled with images, lantern-lit marketplaces, the scent of spices drifting through narrow streets, and caravans forming a line that stretched into the distance like a living ribbon. The travellers continued, speaking of lands farther west, of Persian gardens, where water ran through channels carved with great care, of carpet weavers whose hands moved with tender precision, of scholars who debated philosophy beneath the shade of cypress trees. They described Samarkand, where blue-tiled buildings glistened beneath the sun, where bazaars vibrated with the voices of hundreds of people, and where rulers maintained order through systems both intricate and adaptable. As Temüjin listened, he sensed a pattern woven through every story. Unity made these lands strong. Cooperation gave them life. Coordinated leadership allowed them to flourish. Not through fear, not through constant conflict, but through shared purpose. When the travelers paused, Temüjin asked softly, "Do all these lands stay peaceful because they are united?" One of the merchants, a wise-looking man with gentle eyes, nodded slowly. "Peace holds as long as trust holds. These kingdoms grow strong because their people work for something greater than themselves. But peace, young one, peace must be tended with care. When leaders fail to guide their people, even the strongest kingdoms can fracture." Temüjin lowered his gaze thoughtfully, absorbing the lesson. The trader continued, "But I've seen something in your lands, a strength not yet realized. The people of the steppe have resilience unlike any other. They move with the land. They understand the sky. With unity, they could shape the world." His words settled into Temüjin's heart, like seeds carried on the wind. When the traders departed days later, Temüjin walked to a ridge overlooking the plains, watching the caravans slowly diminish into the distance. He felt both awe and a quiet ache, a longing not to leave the steppe, but to understand it more deeply by understanding the world beyond it. Over the next months, Temüjin returned to such thoughts often. He rode long distances with his brothers, noting how the steppe changed subtly with each region. Clans adapted differently to weather, terrain, and the needs of their herds. Some lived near rivers, relying on fishing. Others roamed high plateaus, following mountain grasses. Some traded frequently with travelers, while others preferred isolation. And yet, all shared common threads: the sky above them, the horses they depended on, and the desire for security in an unpredictable world. Temüjin saw clearly how unity could ease many burdens. Shared resources, shared safety, shared paths across the land. But he also understood the delicate balance required to achieve such unity. The clans valued their independence fiercely. Any attempt to bind them together would need not force, but trust. And trust grew slowly, like grass returning after winter. Still, Temüjin was patient. His understanding deepened quietly, shaped not by sudden revelation, but by countless small observations. One evening, near the end of a long migration, the clan settled beside a tranquil river whose surface reflected the soft glow of sunset. Temüjin sat by the water's edge, dipping his hand into the cool current. The ripples spread outward in widening circles. He watched them thoughtfully. His father approached and sat beside him with a low sigh. "You have been quiet these days," Yesugei said gently. Temüjin nodded. "I am thinking, father." "Yes," Yesugei replied with a small smile. "I can see that." They sat in peaceful silence for a moment. Finally, Temüjin said, "The merchant spoke of lands far away, lands where people work together under one banner. I wonder, could the clans ever stand together like that?" Yesugei studied him with soft admiration. "You ask questions most men never ask," he said, "and that is why the sky watches you closely." Temüjin looked out across the plains. "Our people are strong," he murmured. "But divided, we are fragile." "Yes," Yesugei agreed quietly. "Unity brings strength, but unity requires a guide, a heart steady enough to hold many lives together." Temüjin felt the words settle in him like quiet truth. "I know you, Temüjin," Yasuge continued softly. "You do not rush into dreams. You listen. You observe. That is what makes the possibility of unity more than a dream." Temüjin lowered his gaze, humbled but strengthened. The river continued its gentle flow. The wind brushed the grass. The sky held its vast blue silence overhead. Months passed. Temüjin's understanding matured with the changing seasons. He learned to mend harnesses more efficiently, to judge the health of animals by their breath and movements, and to ride longer distances without tiring. He trained in archery and wrestling, not for superiority, but for discipline. More importantly, he learned the hearts of people, their fears, their hopes, the reasons behind their actions. He learned that a leader must not only guide, but understand, must not only speak, but listen. These were the quiet lessons of the calm before the storm. Because even as Temüjin's heart awakened to the possibilities of unity and cooperation, the winds of the steppe were beginning to carry different whispers, subtle warnings of shifts occurring beyond his control. Whispers of rising tensions between clans, whispers of old grudges awakening, whispers of events waiting just beyond the horizon, ready to alter the gentle rhythm of his life. For now, the steppe remained calm, but beneath that calm, something in the air waited. As Temüjin slept beneath the steady watch of the eternal blue sky, he could not yet know how swiftly life would change, but the night held him in a quiet embrace, offering rest before the journey ahead. The silk roads stretched far beyond his dreams, and soon, without warning, the steppe itself would push him toward a path that would reshape everything. The seasons drifted onward like soft waves across the grasslands. Temüjin, now stepping firmly into early adulthood, carried with him all the quiet lessons accumulated through years of careful observation, his father's guidance, his mother's strength, the stories of distant kingdoms, and the murmured truths of traders who had crossed deserts and passed through shimmering cities. The world felt enormous, full of possibility, yet the steppe still remained his true home, open, unbounded, and whispering with the breath of the eternal blue sky. But even as he continued learning, the gentle peace that had characterized his youth began to tremble at the edges. It started subtly, shifts in the way clans greeted one another, pauses in conversations, a certain wariness in the eyes of leaders who had once exchanged easy smiles. Like the first faint drift of cold air that hints at winter's approach, these signs were easy to overlook. Yet Temüjin felt them like a soft tension woven through the wind. Change, he knew, rarely arrived suddenly. It gathered slowly, like storm clouds forming on a distant ridge. One afternoon, as the Börte clan prepared to move toward new grazing grounds, Temüjin helped secure the bundles that would be carried on horses. Hölön watched him with a mixture of pride and wistful recognition. Her son was growing taller, his shoulders broadening, his movements steady and purposeful. "You have your father's bearing," she said softly, "but you walk with your own spirit." Temüjin smiled with gentle warmth. "Everything I know, I learnt from both of you." Hölön brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "And from the land," she added. "Never forget the steppe. It has shaped every breath you take." He nodded, understanding more deeply now how true her words were. The wind, the seasons, the hardships and joys, they were all lessons in their own way. As they travelled, Temüjin noticed how the clans they encountered seemed preoccupied. Small disputes flared more quickly than before. A disagreement over water access, a misunderstanding about grazing boundaries, rumours of old rivalries resurfacing like hidden embers. None were large enough to cause immediate alarm, yet their frequency hinted at the early tremors of a shifting landscape. One evening, after helping settle the herds, Temüjin walked with Kasar along a gentle slope overlooking the camp. The sky above them glowed with soft amber light as the sun dipped low. "Kasar," Temüjin said quietly, "do you feel it? The clans, they walk more cautiously these days." Kasar stopped, resting one hand on the hilt of his knife. "I have felt it," he admitted. "Something is stirring. No one says so directly, but you can see it in their eyes." Temüjin looked across the plains, where distant shadows stretched long over the grass. "Do you think trouble is coming?" Kasar shrugged, though his expression remained thoughtful. "Trouble always comes, but we face it when it arrives." Temüjin appreciated his brother's simplicity. Kasar lived with boldness, meeting challenges head-on, while Temüjin felt them unfolding long before they arrived. Together, their strengths balanced. Still, Temüjin's mind drifted. He thought of the traders' stories, of lands where order rested on shared purpose, where differences were woven into strength rather than division. If such unity could exist elsewhere, why not here? Why should the steppe, beautiful but fragile, remain trapped in its cycles of rivalry? Yet he understood that the path toward unity was not one he could walk alone. The clans valued their independence fiercely. Respect had to be earned carefully, one action at a time. His thoughts settled as he recalled Börte, the girl he was promised to marry. Though still living with her family, far from the Borjigin camp, her presence lingered in his mind like a soft source of steadiness. She too had spoken of unity. She too had sensed the fractures beneath the surface of clan life. One twilight, as Temüjin sat alone near a small fire, his father approached. Yesugei's expression was unreadable, not troubled, but weighted with contemplation. "Temüjin," he began gently, "soon you will journey to Börte's family. The time to honor that promise draws near." Temüjin felt a quiet warmth flow through him. "I am ready," he said softly. Yesugei nodded. "I know you are." He paused, then added, "Her family will become your allies, but alliances are not chains. They must be built on respect." Temüjin absorbed the words, understanding their deeper meaning. Marriage was more than personal. It was a bond between families, a thread woven into the vast fabric of clan relationships. As they walked back toward the Jer, the sky above them shimmered with early stars. Yesugei looked upward thoughtfully. "The eternal blue sky watches all things," he murmured. "It sees the rise and fall of men, the shifting of clans, the choices that shape generations." Temüjin followed his gaze. "Do you believe the sky has a path for each of us?" "Yes," Yesugei said simply, "but it is not fixed. It changes with our decisions." The next morning, word spread that a distant clan had encountered trouble, an unexpected skirmish with a neighboring tribe. No one knew the details, but the whispers carried tension. Temüjin observed the elders as they spoke. Their voices were low, guarded. Later, he saw a young boy from a nearby family crying near the edge of camp. The child had heard the adults speaking and feared for his brothers who had ridden far from home. Temüjin knelt beside him, resting a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "The steppe is wide," he said softly. "Troubles travel slowly. Your brothers are safe." The boy wiped his tears and nodded. Temüjin stayed with him until he smiled again. Small gestures, Temüjin knew, mattered. Kindness built trust. Trust built unity. As the days passed, Temüjin's instincts sharpened further. He noticed how leaders exchanged glances during gatherings, how messages were delivered in hushed tones, how small disagreements were handled with unusual caution. It was as though the clans collectively sensed change approaching, but were unsure from which direction it would come. One evening, the sky darkened earlier than usual, covered by soft rolling clouds. Temüjin walked to the riverbank and listened to the hush of flowing water. The air felt different, heavy yet expectant. Jamuka appeared beside him, having arrived with his clan earlier that day. "You look thoughtful," Jamuka said softly. Temüjin smiled faintly. "The land is shifting. I feel it." Jamuka nodded slowly. "I feel it too, but perhaps these changes will bring opportunity." Temüjin considered the words. Jamuka spoke with confidence, always looking toward advantage. Temüjin saw opportunity differently, not as a means to rise alone, but as a chance to bring the clans closer. "The steppe could be stronger," Temüjin said, "if we found a way to work together." Jamuka's eyes glimmered. "Perhaps one day you will be the one to make that happen." Temüjin lowered his gaze, humbled by the thought. "If the sky wills it." Jamuka smiled. "Sometimes the sky waits for someone to act." They stood in silence as the river murmured softly. The air was cool, the clouds drifting slowly across a darkening sky. That night, Temüjin returned to the Jere with a calm heart. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the steppe's fragile balance was reaching a turning point. Change hovered like a gentle wind, waiting to stir the grass. He lay beneath warm blankets, listening to the soft breaths of his family as they slept. Outside, the eternal blue sky, hidden behind clouds, felt close, almost protective. Temüjin closed his eyes, sensing without understanding that the gentle days were nearing their end. Soon, he would begin a journey that would draw him into challenges far larger than himself. But for now, the steppe held him in a quiet embrace, offering rest in the calm before the next unfolding of destiny. The seasons turned once more across the vast Mongolian steppe, and Temüjin, now long past the fragile days of youth, walked with the calm steadiness of a man who had carried many responsibilities, faced many trials, and guided many hearts. The quiet boy who had once listened to traders beneath the glow of a small fire had become a leader known across the plains. And though the world had changed around him, a part of his spirit remained deeply anchored in the same gentle truths he had learned in childhood. Patience, unity, and the steady strength that grew from understanding rather than force. By now, his name carried a weight felt even in distant lands. Some whispered it with awe, others with curiosity. But for those who knew him, truly knew him, he was still Temüjin, the boy who had studied the wind, who had walked gently among his people, and who had dreamed of a steppe united not by conquest, but by shared purpose and peace. In these later years, Temüjin travelled often, not in pursuit of conflict, but in search of harmony. He moved with the changing seasons, visiting the families who looked to him for guidance, ensuring their needs were met, resolving disputes before they grew into storms, and reminding the clans that their strength lay in unity, not rivalry. His presence brought comfort. When he arrived in a camp, people felt the land grow a little steadier beneath their feet. Yet even a strong spirit grows weary with time. There came a season when Temüjin's journeys grew slower, his steps a bit heavier, though his mind remained clear as a river in the early morning. He did not ignore the signs, he simply accepted them with the same quiet grace with which he had accepted every challenge throughout his life. But he carried one final wish: to see once more the familiar places of his childhood, the Onon River, the gentle slopes where he had ridden as a boy, and the hills where the wind had whispered ancient truths into his young ears. And so, when the grass was soft with early summer growth, he set out with a small group of close companions and family members. Börte, his partner in life and in vision, travelled by his side, her presence a source of warmth that steadied him even now. His sons rode nearby, offering support when needed, but allowing him the freedom to move at his own pace. They understood this journey was important, less for its destination, and more for the memories woven into the land. The caravan moved gently across the plains, avoiding haste. The sky stretched wide overhead, its blue soft and deep, as though watching over them with familiar affection. The wind carried the scent of wild flowers and distant streams. Birds circled overhead, calling softly to one another. It felt in many ways like the steppe itself was welcoming Temüjin home. As they travelled, Temüjin spoke often with his companions, not of battles or victories, but of simple things, the changing patterns of the grasslands, the wisdom found in stillness, and the quiet joys of family. He asked after the clans, wanting to ensure their unity remained strong. He listened to the concerns of younger leaders, offering gentle guidance that felt less like instruction and more like the passing of a lantern from one steady hand to another. At night, when the campfires glowed softly and the stars shimmered high above, Temüjin rested beneath firs, listening to the familiar hum of the steppe. The wind moved as softly as a mother's lullaby. Sometimes he would speak quietly to Börte, recalling memories of their early years, when they had spoken of unity before it had become reality, when they had dreamed of peace during times when peace seemed distant. Börte listened with a serene smile, her presence a mirror of all the strength that had guided him through life's storms. As the journey continued, Temüjin's thoughts drifted often to the people he had loved and lost. His father, whose early lessons had shaped his understanding of leadership. His mother, whose resilience had taught him courage without harshness. His childhood friends, including Jamuka, whose paths had ultimately diverged from his own in sorrowful ways. Temüjin thought of these memories not with pain, but with quiet acceptance. Every person, every choice, every step had played a role in shaping his path. After many days of travel, they reached the banks of the Onon River. The water shimmered beneath the sunlight, moving with the same gentle rhythm it had carried when Temüjin was a boy, dipping his hand in the cool current and watching the ripples spread. He dismounted slowly, with the help of his sons, and walked to the edge of the river. The air was fresh and familiar. Reeds swayed softly in the breeze. A dragonfly hovered briefly above the water, its wings catching the light like shards of green glass. Temüjin knelt with care. He pressed his fingertips into the water, feeling its coolness wrap around his skin. In that moment, it felt as though time folded gently upon itself, past and present meeting in the quiet whisper of flowing water. Börte stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. He looked up at her with deep affection, grateful for her presence across all the seasons of his life. "I am home," he whispered softly. In the days that followed, Temüjin stayed near the river, walking its banks in the mornings and resting beneath the shade of small trees in the afternoons. He spoke often with his sons, offering final pieces of wisdom. Not commands, not strict instructions, but gentle reminders. "Remember," he told them, "the clans are strongest when they speak to one another. Listen before you decide. Guide before you command." He told them to hold unity as their compass, to treat their people with empathy, and to honor the land that had shaped their lives. At twilight, Temüjin often sat quietly, watching the sky shift to shades of rose and gold, then deepen into a soft violet as stars emerged. He seemed at peace, not eager for what came next, but ready, as though his life had brought him to this moment, with calm inevitability. One evening, as a warm breeze flowed across the river, Temüjin asked his sons to sit with him. They gathered close, forming a quiet circle around their father. The light flickered gently across their faces. "I have walked many paths," Temüjin said softly. "Some difficult, some joyful, but each has taught me something." He paused, his breath steady. "The greatest lesson is this. A nation is not built by one man, but by many hearts moving in the same direction." His words hung in the air like a soft blessing. In the days that followed, Temüjin's strength began to fade, not suddenly but gently, like the final glow of sunset before dusk deepens. His family stayed close, offering comfort and warmth. Börte held his hand often, her touch familiar and steady. On his final morning, the sky was clear. The wind moved softly through the grass, brushing the land with a tenderness that felt almost conscious. Temüjin opened his eyes and looked out toward the horizon, the same horizon he had watched as a boy, as a young man full of dreams, and as a leader guiding his people toward unity. He smiled faintly. "The sky," he murmured. "It is calm today." Börte leaned close. "It watches over you." Temüjin exhaled softly, as though releasing the last of his burdens to the wind. And with that gentle breath, surrounded by family and embraced by the land that had shaped his entire life, he slipped peacefully into rest. There was no storm, no struggle, only quiet. The eternal blue sky held him as it had from the beginning. His family wept softly, not in despair, but in reverent sorrow, honoring the depth of a life lived with purpose, compassion, and unwavering vision. Word traveled slowly across the steppe, and as it did, families gathered beneath open skies. Some lit small fires in his memory. Others offered quiet prayers. Many simply looked toward the horizon and felt gratitude for the man who had brought unity where division once reigned. Temüjin's journey had ended, but his presence lingered in every whisper of wind, every field of swaying grass, every cluster of families living together in peace. He had walked the steppe with gentleness. He had guided with wisdom. And though he was gone, his spirit remained in the land he loved. Vast, enduring, and open as the eternal blue sky. The steppe did not grow silent after Temüjin's passing. Instead, it seemed to breathe more deeply, as though exhaling a long, thoughtful sigh. Winds brushed softly across the plains, carrying with them memories of the man who had once ridden across these same fields with a vision that had reshaped the destiny of countless families. His presence lingered, not in a physical sense, but in the quiet way people spoke his name, the calm certainty with which they recalled his guidance, and the newfound stability that rested gently where once only division had stood. In the camps scattered across the grasslands, life resumed its steady rhythm after the days of mourning. Herds still moved under the watch of careful shepherds. Children still chased one another through tall grass. Fires still crackled warmly at dusk. But beneath these familiar patterns, something had changed, something subtle yet unmistakable. People now spoke of themselves not simply as members of separate clans, but as part of a greater whole. Where once families had greeted unfamiliar travelers with cautious distance, they now shared food more readily. Where once leaders held tightly to their own small circles of influence, they now met more frequently to discuss shared concerns. The fragile trust Temüjin had nurtured through years of careful guidance had taken root, embedding itself in the steppe like the deep roots of a hardy grass that could survive any wind. It was not perfect. No unity ever was. But the old wounds between clans no longer felt impossible to mend, and the new bonds forming between families brought strength to places where weakness had once lingered. Temüjin's sons carried forward his gentle principles, each in their own way. They were men shaped by his teachings, men who understood that leadership was not a single voice shouting from above, but a chorus of hearts moving with shared intention. Though their personalities differed, each had inherited his steadiness, his quiet conviction, and the understanding that empathy was as essential as strength. Yochi, the eldest, spoke often of stability. He travelled between camps to ensure harmony, offering calm words where tempers flared and finding peaceful solutions to disputes. He remembered his father's teachings about trust, that trust was not given once, but must be tended like a fire through every season. Chagatai, firm yet fair, oversaw matters of tradition and justice, guiding families towards solutions that honoured both the present and the past. His voice carried weight, and though he could be stern, he upheld the principles Temüjin had lived by. Ergedei, gentle of heart, became a source of reassurance for those uncertain about the changing world. His kindness reflected Temüjin's own, and many said he possessed a rare ability to bring calm even to the most troubled mind. Tolui, the youngest, moved with a quiet grace reminiscent of Temüjin's early years. He spent time with families recovering from hardship, offering help without demanding recognition. People trusted him instinctively. Together, these sons kept alive the values Temüjin had passed down: unity, compassion, and the belief that strength meant nothing unless shared. Yet even as his sons tended these responsibilities, the memory of their father felt like a steady flame guiding them. In quiet moments, each of them found comfort in recalling his lessons: how to listen fully before speaking, how to weigh choices with care, how to place the needs of the many above the desires of the few. Börte, too, played a quiet but powerful role in shaping the steppe after Temüjin's passing. Though age had softened her steps, the wisdom in her eyes remained as bright as ever. Families sought her counsel, knowing her heart had always held a clear vision of unity. She reminded people of decisions made long ago, of promises Temüjin had sealed with words of sincerity. She encouraged leaders to walk paths of cooperation, to see themselves not as isolated figures, but as threads woven tightly into a shared fabric. Her presence was a guiding light, a symbol of continuity, and a reminder that Temüjin's legacy was not merely a list of achievements, but a living influence carried in the hearts of the people. In the months that followed Temüjin's death, gatherings were held in his memory. Not grand ceremonies, but quiet circles of families gathered around warm fires. Elders told stories of his childhood. The boy who listened to the wind, who observed the world with soft eyes, who sought harmony before conflict. They spoke of the moment he first rode a pony alone, steady and sure despite his youth. They shared memories of his early friendships, of the hopes he whispered beside rivers and under twilight skies. These stories brought comfort, reminding listeners that greatness grew from simple beginnings, from a kind heart, a loyal spirit, and the courage to dream of something better. Children listened with wide eyes, imagining the young Temüjin running through the same grasses they now played in. Many felt inspired by these tales, understanding that leadership did not come from force alone, but from the willingness to walk with others, to listen, to understand. The steppe itself seemed to honor his memory. Winds moved across the plains in gentle currents, as if carrying his presence from one horizon to the next. The sky, vast and serene, often mirrored the calmness he had brought to his people. Travelers who rode between camps spoke of how different the land felt. There was still work to be done. Old grievances did not vanish overnight, but the undercurrent of fear that had once rippled through the tribes had eased. Families spoke more openly. Leaders consulted one another before making decisions that affected many. Arguments still flared, but more often than not, they were settled with consideration rather than impulse. Temüjin's legacy was not simply the unity he had fostered, but the mindset he had nurtured, a way of seeing the steppe as a shared home rather than a patchwork of conflicting territories. One evening, as summer dipped softly into autumn, a group of families gathered near a hillside overlooking a broad, peaceful valley. The sky shimmered with soft hues of rose and gold. Children played nearby, their laughter drifting lightly through the air. Elders sat together, recounting stories of Temüjin's early wisdom. A young boy, no older than Temüjin had been when he first contemplated unity, asked quietly, "Will we ever see another like him?" An elderly woman, her eyes thoughtful and kind, shook her head gently. "There will never be another Temüjin," she said, "but his spirit lives in every one of us who remembers his teachings." Another elder added, "The greatness of a leader does not lie in how long he lives, but in how deeply he touches the hearts of his people." Temüjin showed us a way to walk together. It is our duty to walk it. The boy nodded, as though absorbing a truth that would guide him throughout his life. And so the days continued. Peaceful more often than troubled, hopeful more often than uncertain. The steppe moved with the rhythms of nature, and the families who lived upon it moved with new understanding, their lives gently illuminated by the legacy left in Temüjin's memory. His journey had ended, but the story continued in the actions of his people, in their kindness, their cooperation, their shared belief that unity brought strength. The dust of the endless plains rose and fell with the wind, and in that dust lived the quiet echo of a man who had once dreamed of a united steppe, and through patience and vision had brought that dream to life. The steppe rolled on beneath the eternal blue sky, vast and unbroken, carrying Temüjin's memory toward horizons he had once gazed upon, with the curiosity of a child and the wisdom of a leader. Though the years moved forward, the land still whispered his name, not with sorrow, but with reverence, as though the plains themselves wished to keep alive the story of the boy who had grown into a guiding spirit for all who lived there. In the time after Temüjin's passing, families across the grasslands found themselves looking at the world through gentler eyes. Where once they had seen only their own herds, they now saw the herds of neighboring families. Where once they had guarded their fires against unfamiliar faces, they now welcomed travelers with a warmth Temüjin himself had modeled. His memory had become a quiet heartbeat within the steppe, a steady rhythm reminding people that unity brought safety, comfort, and hope. Under the care of his sons, the clans continued to meet regularly. These gatherings were not tense negotiations or fragile truces, but peaceful councils where leaders spoke with honesty and listened with patience. Old mistrusts loosened their grip. Younger generations grew up in a world shaped by cooperation rather than fear. Disputes still occurred, as they always had, but they no longer spiraled into cycles of retaliation. Instead, families remembered the wise words Temüjin had often spoken. A voice heard calmly is stronger than a voice raised loudly. His name remained on the tongues of storytellers, woven into bedtime tales that soothed children beneath warm blankets. Elders recited the story of his birth, his promise to Börte, his quiet courage, and the way he had seen possibility in places others overlooked. These stories were not told to glorify power, but to remind families that even the greatest changes began with simple moments. A young boy listening to the wind, a mother whispering blessings beside a fire, a teenager wondering whether unity was possible, a man choosing understanding over conflict. As the seasons passed, the land itself seemed to remember Temüjin. At dawn, when the sun rose slowly over the hills, light spread across the plains with a softness that felt almost ceremonial. Herds moved in gentle arcs, their silhouettes merging with the golden glow. Rivers shimmered in the early light, carrying reflections of sky, grass, and the memory of the boy who had once dipped his hands into their cool waters and dreamed of a peaceful world. Sometimes, travelers said the wind carried a faint echo, a tone warm and steady, like a leader's voice guiding his people. It was only wind, of course, but those who believed in such things felt comfort in the thought. One evening, as autumn brushed the plains with its first breath of coolness, a group of elders sat together beneath the open sky. Children gathered around them, settling into soft blankets as stars began to appear one by one. "Tell us the story again," a small girl asked, a child with bright eyes and hair that glistened in the firelight. The eldest among them smiled gently. "Which part, little one?" "The part where he learns about the world," she said. "The part where he listens to the traders. The part where he understands the sky." The elder nodded. "Ah, that part sits close to my heart." He began the tale slowly, his voice calm and even, like the flow of a river. He spoke of Temüjin's youth, of the first moments when he realized the clans might stand together. He spoke of his friendship with Jamuka, of the promise to Börte, and of his long years learning the hearts of people. He spoke of moments of hardship, softened now by the passing of time, and of the deep compassion that had guided him through every trial. As the elder spoke, the children listened with wide eyes, imagining the steppe as it had been long ago. They pictured the young Temüjin watching herds move beneath the sky, feeling the world expand each time a traveller shared a story, sensing a greater path forming quietly before him. "And that," the elder concluded gently, is how he helped the clans walk together, not through fear, not through force, but through understanding, through the belief that the steppe was one great home. The children sighed softly, the story settling around them like a warm blanket. Above, the sky shimmered with stars, each one blinking gently as if acknowledging the tale. As the night deepened, families prepared to sleep in their yurts. Fires dimmed, horses settled, the plains grew still. In the quiet moments before dreams drifted in, many found themselves thinking of Temüjin, not as a distant figure of history, but as a guiding presence woven into their daily lives. They thought of the patience he had shown, the wisdom he had shared, and the unity he had nurtured. His life reminded them that even the vast steppe could feel like a close-knit home when people walked together. And though time continued its steady march forward, the lessons Temüjin left behind grew stronger with each generation. They were passed from parent to child, from elder to youth, like threads weaving a tapestry of harmony across the land. A tapestry that shimmered beneath the eternal blue sky. Eventually, even the elders who had known Temüjin in their youth grew old and quiet. But their stories lived on, carried by the whispers of the grass, the soft murmur of rivers, and the voices of new storytellers who kept the memory alive with gentle reverence. Temüjin's name had become more than a name. It was a reminder that unity is possible, that kindness builds strength, that the dreams of one person can shape the destiny of many. As the wind moved across the darkened plains, brushing softly against the grass, it carried a final message, one felt rather than heard. Walk gently, lead with wisdom. And wherever you go, remember the sky watches kindly. And so, the story of Temüjin, child of the steppe, guide of his people, and humble dreamer beneath the endless blue, settled into the land he loved. A story that did not end with his final breath, but continued in every life touched by the unity he inspired.